you're in danger, to pretend you're my wife and dance with me.
What aren't you telling me?
The fake wife arrangement was supposed to last one dance, until the gunman showed up at her daughter's preschool. Emily Carter never imagined that accepting a stranger's proposal at her sister's wedding would pull her into a world of power, danger, and impossible choices. When Chicago's most dangerous crime boss offers protection in exchange for pretending to be his wife, a single mother with nothing left to lose says yes. But some lies become truth. Some protection becomes love, and some arrangements become forever. Follow Emily's story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Bunch. The champagne flutes clinked like tiny bells throughout the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel, each delicate sound a reminder that Emily Carter didn't belong here. She sat alone at table 17, the table they put you at when family obligation required an invitation, but genuine welcome didn't extend quite that far. The centerpiece of white roses and eucalyptus blocked most of her view of the head table, which was probably intentional. She'd learned long ago that her family preferred her presence to be theoretical rather than visible. Her younger sister Melissa looked radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown, all ivory silk and calculated perfection. 4 years younger than Emily, already on her second six-figure salary, marrying a corporate attorney whose family owned half of Lake Forest. Their parents beamed from their seats of honor, her mother's diamonds catching the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. Emily smoothed down the front of her own dress, a simple navy sheath she'd found at a consignment shop in Lincoln Park. Presentable enough to avoid embarrassment, but not so nice that anyone would forget which daughter was the disappointment. "Is this seat taken?" Emily glanced up at the elderly woman hovering beside the empty chair to her right. Gray hair, kind eyes, expensive jewelry that somehow looked understated rather than showy. One of the groom's relatives, probably. "No, please," Emily said, grateful for any company that might make her look less pathetic sitting alone. The woman settled in with a soft sigh, then leaned closer. "The family tables always feel like performance art, don't they? Everyone playing their assigned role." Emily managed a small smile. "What role are you playing?" "The wealthy aunt who's supposed to be charming and eccentric but is really just tired of pretending." She extended a hand. "Margaret Bellini." "Emily Carter." They shook, and Emily noticed the woman's grip was surprisingly firm. "I'm the bride's sister." "Ah." Margaret's eyes swept over Emily with an assessing look that felt more curious than judgmental. "The pediatric nurse, yes? Melissa mentioned you work at Children's Memorial." "Northwestern now. They merged a few years back." Emily was surprised her sister had mentioned her at all, much less her career. Melissa usually introduced Emily as "my older sister," with the kind of emphasis that made it clear she meant cautionary tale. "That must be rewarding work. Difficult, but rewarding." "It is." Emily's fingers traced the stem of her untouched champagne glass. "The kids make it worth it, even on the hardest days." Margaret nodded thoughtfully, but before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the ambient noise of the reception like a blade. "Well, well, look who actually showed up." Emily's entire body tensed. She didn't need to turn around to know who stood behind her, but years of ingrained politeness made her do it anyway. Ryan Cole looked exactly as he had when she'd last seen him 6 months ago at the custody hearing, expensively dressed, professionally groomed, and wearing an expression of casual contempt that he'd perfected during their brief, disastrous marriage. He'd aged well in the 3 years since their divorce, or maybe cruelty was just good for some people's complexions. "Ryan." She kept her voice neutral, aware that Margaret was watching the interaction with sharp attention. "I didn't realize you'd be here." "Melissa invited me. We've stayed close, you know. She understands that the divorce wasn't entirely your fault." His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Though we both know you played your part." Emily's hands clenched in her lap beneath the table. "I'm not doing this here." "Doing what? Having a conversation?" Ryan moved around a stand where she could see him fully, his date, a blonde woman who looked barely old enough to drink, hovering uncertainly behind him. "I'm just saying hello to my ex-wife at her sister's wedding, where she's sitting all alone at the back table like some kind of charity case." "Ryan, please. Where's Lily tonight? Not with you, obviously." Finally letting my mother babysit like I've been asking for the past year? His voice carried, and Emily saw heads turning at nearby tables. Or did you pawn her off on whatever discount daycare you could afford on your nurse's salary? Heat flooded Emily's face. Lily is with Mrs. Chen from our building, who she knows and trusts, and you have no right to question my childcare choices when you've seen your daughter exactly 4 times this year. By your choice, not mine. You're the one who made custody so difficult. You missed 7 scheduled visits. Emily's voice came out louder than she intended, drawing more attention. She forced herself to lower it. You don't get to play the victim when you're the one who keeps disappointing a 5-year-old. Ryan's expression hardened. I have a demanding career. Something you'd understand if you'd ever had real ambition, instead of settling for wiping noses and changing bedpans. Margaret made a small sound of disapproval, but Emily barely heard it over the rushing in her ears. This was why she'd almost skipped the wedding entirely. Why she'd seriously considered faking illness or car trouble or anything that would have spared her this exact moment. I save children's lives, she said quietly, with as much dignity as she could muster. That's not settling. That's a calling. A calling that pays $45,000 a year and keeps you living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a questionable neighborhood. Ryan glanced at his date, who giggled on cue. Tell me, Emily, when was the last time you bought something that wasn't on sale? When was the last time you did anything that didn't involve counting pennies and making do? Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. Excuse me, I need some air. She didn't wait for a response, just walked quickly toward the terrace doors at the far end of the ballroom, keeping her head down and praying she wouldn't cry until she was outside. Behind her, she heard Margaret's voice, sharp and cold. Young man, that was absolutely uncalled for. Ryan's reply was muffled, dismissive. Emily pushed through the doors and out onto the terrace, where October air hit her like a slap. She'd left her wrap inside, but she didn't care. The cold felt good, grounding, real. The terrace overlooked Lake Michigan, dark water stretching to an invisible horizon. City lights glittered to the north and south, millions of people living their lives, probably not standing alone at their sister's wedding, fighting back tears because their ex-husband was right about absolutely everything. She wasn't crying. She refused to cry. Ryan didn't deserve her tears, and neither did this whole ridiculous situation. She'd known coming here was a mistake, known that her family would seat her in the back, that whispers would follow her wherever she moved, that someone would inevitably bring up her failed marriage or her struggles, or the way she derailed her life by getting pregnant at 23. Rough night? Emily startled, turning to find a man leaning against the terrace railing about 10 feet away. She hadn't noticed him in the shadows, but now that she looked, she couldn't understand how she'd missed him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair and the kind of face that belonged in magazines or movies. Sharp jaw, intelligent eyes, expensive suit that fit him the way clothes fit men who can afford actual tailoring. Mid-30s, she guessed. Handsome in a way that probably caused problems wherever he went. I'm fine, she said automatically, then realized how unconvincing that sounded when she was standing alone in the cold without a coat, probably with mascara smudged under her eyes. Just needed a moment. Understandable. Wedding receptions can feel like social warfare. He didn't move closer, respecting her space, but she saw him studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. Especially when you're seated at table 17. Emily blinked. How did you know? I'm at table 19. The overflow tables for people who are obligated to attend but not important enough to play strategically. He smiled, and something about it felt genuine despite everything else about him screaming calculated control. I saw what happened inside. Your ex-husband is an asshole. A surprised laugh escaped her before she could stop it. That's accurate. I'm Marco. He extended his hand but still didn't approach, letting her decide whether to close the distance. Emily hesitated, then stepped forward and shook his hand. His grip was warm, steady. Emily? Emily Carter, the bride's older sister, pediatric nurse, single mother of a 5-year-old daughter. Marco's expression shifted slightly. Margaret mentioned you before I came outside. She's my grandmother, and she's very upset about how that man spoke to you. She doesn't need to be upset on my behalf. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it acceptable. Emily pulled her hand back, suddenly aware that she'd held it too long. Are you close to the groom's family? Distantly. My grandmother and the groom's grandmother were roommates in college about a century ago. They've stayed friends, so here I am, fulfilling family obligations. Marco turned to lean both forearms on the railing, looking out at the water. Though I suspect she also invited me hoping I'd meet someone suitable. She's been on a campaign to see me settled for the past 3 years. Any luck? Not even close. Turns out most women lose interest when they figure out what I actually do for a living. He said it casually, but Emily caught something underneath, not quite bitterness, but maybe resignation. What do you do? Import/export, business consulting, various investments. The answers came smoothly, almost too smoothly, like he'd given them 1,000 times. Nothing interesting enough for polite conversation. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. Marco noticed immediately and shrugged out of his suit jacket. Here. I can't. Well, you're freezing, and I run warm. Take it. He held it out, and after a moment's hesitation, Emily accepted it. The jacket was still warm from his body heat, and it smelled like expensive cologne and something else she couldn't quite identify. She pulled it around her shoulders. Thank you. You're welcome. Marco was quiet for a moment, then, can I ask you something that might be inappropriate? Emily tensed. That's not a promising start. Fair enough. He turned to face her fully, leaning sideways against the railing. Why are you here? Not judging, genuinely asking. You clearly don't want to be. Your family doesn't seem to appreciate your presence, and your ex-husband is using it as an opportunity to humiliate you publicly. So why subject yourself to this? The blunt honesty caught her off guard. Most people danced around these things, hiding behind politeness and social convention. Marco apparently didn't bother. Because Melissa is my sister, Emily said finally. Because my parents would never forgive me if I missed it. Because I'm trying to prove that I haven't completely failed at life, even though everyone thinks I have. Have you? Failed at life? Emily laughed, but it came out hollow. Depends on your definition. I have a beautiful daughter who I love more than anything. I have a job that matters. I have a roof over our heads and food on the table. By most measures, I'm doing okay. But by my family's measures, I'm a cautionary tale. Got pregnant in my last year of college by a man who proposed because his parents pressured him, not because he loved me. Dropped out to have the baby. Married him anyway because I thought I should, thought maybe we could make it work. Divorced 3 years later when it became obvious we were making each other miserable. Now I'm 28, single, living paycheck to paycheck, and watching my younger sister achieve everything I was supposed to achieve first. She stopped abruptly, shocked at herself. She'd just unloaded her entire life story to a complete stranger on a hotel terrace. What was wrong with her? Sorry, she muttered. You didn't ask for my life history. I asked why you were here. You answered honestly. Marco's expression was thoughtful. For what it's worth, I don't think any of that makes you a failure. Sounds like you made the best choices you could in difficult circumstances, and you're raising a child alone while working a demanding job. That takes more strength than most people ever develop. Emily felt her throat tighten. When was the last time someone had said something like that to her? When had anyone looked at her life and seen strength instead of mistakes? Thank you, she whispered. Marco nodded, then pushed away from the railing with a sudden decisiveness that made Emily think he'd come to some kind of decision. I have a proposition for you. Emily's defenses immediately went up. What kind of proposition? The kind that might solve both our problems for the evening. He gestured toward the ballroom doors. In about 10 minutes, they're going to start the dancing. Your family will watch you sit alone while everyone else pairs off. Your ex-husband will probably make more comments. You'll feel worse and worse until you finally leave early, and tomorrow everyone will talk about how sad it was to see you there by yourself. He wasn't wrong. That was exactly what would happen. Meanwhile, Marco continued, my grandmother will spend the entire evening trying to introduce me to suitable women, all of whom will be perfectly nice and completely wrong, and I'll spend the whole time making polite conversation while wishing I was literally anywhere else. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we help each other out. You pretend to be my date for the rest of the evening. We dance, we talk. We give both our families something to see besides their respective disappointments. Then we go our separate ways, and at least we'll have made it through this thing without being completely miserable. Emily stared at him. You want me to pretend to be your date? Just for tonight, a few hours. Then you never have to see me again. Marco's expression was completely serious. I know it sounds strange, but consider the alternative. Do you really want to go back in there alone? Emily looked through the terrace doors into the ballroom. She could see Ryan holding court at a table near the bar, probably telling everyone who would listen about his successful career and his hot new girlfriend. Could see her mother glancing toward the terrace with that pinched expression she got when Emily did something embarrassing. Could see Melissa laughing with her new in-laws, golden and perfect, and everything Emily wasn't. What's in it for you? She asked quietly. Really? Marco considered the question. Honestly, I'm tired of being set up. Tired of first dates that go nowhere because women either want something I can't give them or they find out what my life actually involves and they run. My grandmother means well, but she doesn't understand that some people are better off alone. You think you're better off alone? I think my life isn't suited for relationships, but that doesn't mean I enjoy watching everyone else pair off while I make small talk with distant relatives. He met her eyes directly. So yes, I'm being selfish. I'm asking you to help me get through this evening in exchange for helping you do the same. No expectations beyond tonight, no ulterior motives, just two people who'd rather not suffer alone. Emily knew she should say no. Should thank him for the jacket, go back inside, endure the rest of the reception with whatever dignity she could maintain, and go home to her daughter. This was crazy. You didn't just agree to pretend date a stranger at your sister's wedding, but when was the last time she'd done something crazy? When had she last taken any kind of risk, made any choice that wasn't carefully calculated to be safe and responsible and appropriate? Okay, she heard herself say, but just for tonight. Marco's smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. Just for tonight. They went back inside together, and Emily immediately felt the shift in attention. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Her mother's mouth actually fell open slightly. Marco kept his hand on the small of her back, light but possessive, guiding her through the ballroom like she was something precious that required protection. They reached table 17 where Margaret sat with a satisfied smile that suggested she'd known exactly what she was doing when she sent her grandson outside. Feel better, dear? Margaret asked innocently. Much better, thank you. Emily draped Marco's jacket over her chair and sat down, hyper-aware of the stares from surrounding tables. Marco claimed the empty seat beside her, the one that had been vacant all evening because Emily hadn't brought a +1. He settled in like he belonged there. Like sitting beside Emily Carter at table 17 was exactly where he wanted to be. The band started playing something slow and romantic. Couples began moving toward the dance floor. This is our cue, Marco said, standing and offering his hand. Emily's heart hammered. I'm not a very good dancer. Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. She took his hand and let him lead her to the floor. The watching eyes felt like physical weight, but Marco seemed completely unbothered. He pulled her close. Not inappropriately close, but closer than she'd been to any man since her divorce. One hand settled on her waist, the other held hers gently. Just follow my lead, he murmured, and try to look like you're enjoying yourself. I am enjoying myself, Emily admitted, surprised to find it was true. This is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months. They began to move, and Emily discovered that Marco had lied. He was an excellent dancer. He led with confidence, making her look graceful even when she stumbled. Around them, other couples swayed, but Emily was intensely aware that people were watching her and Marco more than anyone else. Your ex-husband is staring, Marco observed quietly. He looks confused. He's probably wondering who you are and what you're doing with me. Let him wonder. Marco spun her gently, and Emily laughed despite herself. When she came back to him, he was smiling. There, that's better. Now you look like you're having fun instead of attending your own funeral. Is my misery that obvious? Only to people paying attention. His hand tightened slightly on her waist. Your family really doesn't appreciate you, do they? They appreciate me. They just wish I'd made different choices. Been someone different. Their loss. The song ended, but Marco didn't let her go. Another song started immediately, something upbeat this time. Other couples adjusted, but Marco pulled her closer. "One more," he said. "Unless you want to go sit down." "No." Emily surprised herself with how quickly she answered. "One more is good." They danced through 3 more songs, and with each one, Emily felt something loosening in her chest. The weight of judgment, of constantly measuring herself against impossible standards, and finding herself lacking. It didn't disappear, but it lightened. Marco made her laugh with dry observations about the other guests. He complimented her dress sincerely enough that she almost believed he meant it. He made her feel for just a little while like she was someone worth noticing. When they finally left the dance floor, Ryan was waiting by their table. "Emily, a word?" He didn't look at Marco, aggressive in his dismissal. "I'm busy, Ryan. It'll just take a moment. About Lily's schedule next month. Email me. We're not discussing custody arrangements at my sister's wedding." "You're being unreasonable." The lady said no. Marco's voice was quiet, but something in it made Ryan actually take a step back. "She doesn't want to talk to you. Respect that." Ryan finally looked at Marco, really looked, and Emily saw recognition flicker across his face. Not personal recognition. Something else. Something that made her ex-husband's expression shift from entitled irritation to careful assessment. "I don't think we've met," Ryan said, extending his hand with forced civility. "Ryan Cole." Marco didn't take the offered hand. "I know who you are." The moment stretched uncomfortably. Ryan finally lowered his hand, something like nervousness entering his eyes. "Right. Well, Emily, we'll talk later." He retreated quickly, and Emily watched him go with confusion. "What was that about?" she asked Marco. "What was what about?" "He looked almost scared of you." "Did he?" Marco guided her back to their chairs. "Maybe he's just not used to being told no." Margaret was beaming at them. "You two looked wonderful out there, very natural together." "Thank you, grandmother." Marco's tone was affectionate but carried a warning. "Don't read too much into it." "I'm merely observing." Margaret's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Emily, dear, would you like some champagne? I think we should toast to new friendships." They toasted. They made conversation with the other overflow table guests. Marco kept his attention on Emily like she was the only person in the room, and Emily found herself responding in ways she hadn't anticipated, laughing more freely, talking more openly, feeling more like herself than she had in years. Dinner was served. Emily picked at her salmon while Marco ate with good appetite, answering questions from other guests with practiced ease. He introduced Emily as his date without hesitation, and she watched her family's reactions shift from curiosity to barely concealed shock. Her mother actually approached their table during dessert. "Emily, I didn't realize you were bringing someone." Carol Carter's smile was strained, her eyes on Marco with undisguised assessment. "Last-minute decision." Emily kept her voice light. "Mom, this is Marco Bellini. Marco, my mother, Carol Carter." Marco stood, shaking her mother's hand with perfect courtesy. "Mrs. Carter, congratulations on your daughter's wedding. It's a beautiful event." "Thank you. Are you a friend of Emily's from the hospital?" "A friend of Emily's from life," Marco said smoothly. "We met through mutual connections." Carol's expression suggested she had about 1,000 questions, but years of social training kept her from asking them at the dessert course. "How lovely. Emily could use more friends." The casual condescension in that statement made Emily's jaw clench, but Marco just smiled. "She certainly deserves them. You must be very proud of her. Single mother, demanding career, raising a child who I'm told is absolutely delightful. That takes remarkable strength." Carol blinked, clearly not expecting the conversation to take that turn. "Yes, well, Emily has always been determined." "She's extraordinary," Marco said, with such conviction that Emily's mother actually appeared flustered. "You're lucky to have her." Carol made a non-committal sound, excused herself, and retreated. Emily stared at Marco. "Why did you say that?" "Because it's true. And because someone needed to." He settled back into his chair. "Your mother talks about you like you're a problem to be managed instead of a person to be celebrated. It's bullshit." Emily felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time for entirely different reasons. "You don't even know me." I know enough. Marco's expression softened. I know you came here even though you knew it would be hard because you love your sister. I know you work yourself to exhaustion taking care of other people's children and then go home and take care of your own. I know your ex-husband tries to make you feel small because he can't handle the fact that you're better than him. Those things tell me plenty. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. They danced more. They talked. Marco deflected intrusive questions from Emily's relatives with practiced charm, and Emily found herself relaxing into the role of his date with surprising ease. When they finally cut the cake and the formal events concluded, guests began to filter out. Marco walked Emily to the coat check, where she reclaimed the thin wrap that had been completely inadequate when she'd arrived hours ago. Thank you, she said quietly as they stood in the Drake's elegant lobby, for tonight, for making this bearable. Thank you for saving me from my grandmother's matchmaking attempts. Marco handed her his business card. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, call that number. Emily looked at the card. Simple, expensive cardstock with just a name and phone number. No company, no title, nothing else. Why would I need anything from you? You probably won't. But on the off chance you do, he left the sentence unfinished, then did something unexpected. He leaned down and kissed her cheek, gentle and brief. Good night, Emily Carter. Take care of yourself and that daughter of yours. Then he was gone, disappearing into a black car that pulled up the moment he stepped outside. Emily stood in the lobby holding his business card and feeling like she'd just experienced something significant, though she couldn't quite explain what. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Lily, sleeping peacefully. Take your time. Emily smiled, slipped Marco's card into her purse, and headed home. She had no way of knowing that just for tonight was about to become something much more complicated. That the man who danced with her to salvage her dignity was actually one of Chicago's most powerful and dangerous figures. That their pretend arrangement had caught the attention of people who would see her as a weakness to exploit. That sometimes accepting help from a stranger changes everything. Emily woke the next morning to Lily bouncing on her bed, all wild curls and infectious energy. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of their one-bedroom apartment, and for a moment, Emily let herself just watch her daughter's pure joy at the start of a new day. Mama, Mrs. Chen gave me cookies last night, and we watched the cartoon about the dancing penguins, and she said I was the best-behaved girl she ever watched. Lily's words tumbled out in an excited rush, her small hands gesturing wildly. Emily caught her daughter mid-bounce and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. Were you really the best behaved? Mostly. Lily's grin was impish. I only asked for 3 cookies instead of 5. Such restraint. Emily tickled her sides, earning delighted squeals. What do you want for breakfast, sweetheart? Pancakes with the chocolate chips. They made their way to the tiny kitchen that was barely big enough for one person, let alone 2. Emily mixed batter while Lily sat on the counter, against all safety rules Emily enforced at work, but somehow allowed at home, and chattered about everything and nothing. The wedding felt like a dream from another life, something that had happened to someone else entirely. But when Emily went to hang up her purse, Marco's business card fell out onto the floor. Lily picked it up immediately, studying it with the intense focus she gave everything. Who's Marco Bellini? Just someone Mama met at Aunt Melissa's wedding. Is he nice? Emily thought about Marco's quiet strength, the way he'd defended her without making a scene, how he'd made her feel visible for the first time in years. Yes, sweetie, he's very nice. Does he like pancakes? I don't know what he likes. Emily took the card gently from Lily's hands and slipped it into the kitchen drawer where she kept takeout menus and grocery coupons. Now, chocolate chips or no chocolate chips? Chocolate chips, obviously. The weekend passed in its usual rhythm of laundry and playground visits and grocery shopping with extreme attention to prices. Emily worked a 12-hour shift on Monday at Northwestern, dealing with a respiratory virus that had hit half the pediatric ward. She came home exhausted, made Lily dinner, supervised homework that consisted mostly of coloring inside the lines, and collapsed into bed without thinking once about mysterious men or impossible dances. By Wednesday, the wedding had faded to a pleasant but distant memory, until her phone rang during her lunch break. Emily Carter? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. This is Amanda Price from Bellini Enterprises. Mr. Bellini asked me to reach out regarding a dinner invitation for this Friday evening. Emily nearly dropped her coffee. I'm sorry, what? Mr. Bellini would like to invite you to dinner at Alinea this Friday at 7. A car will pick you up at 6:30 if you accept. Alinea, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Chicago, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance and cost more for one meal than Emily spent on groceries in a month. I don't understand. Why would he? Mr. Bellini didn't provide details, just asked that I extend the invitation. Amanda's tone suggested she was used to making calls like this, arranging pieces of her employer's life without question. Should I confirm your attendance? Every rational part of Emily's brain screamed no. She didn't know this man. One dance at a wedding didn't constitute a relationship. This was how horror movies started, accepting invitations from wealthy strangers who knew too much about your life. Miss Carter? I have a daughter, Emily said finally. I can't just go out on Friday night without arranging childcare. Mr. Bellini anticipated that concern. He's arranged for a professional childcare service, fully vetted and bonded, to stay with your daughter for the evening. At no cost to you, naturally. Naturally, Emily echoed faintly. Who did things like this? Who arranged professional childcare for someone they'd met once? I need an answer, Miss Carter. Mr. Bellini has other commitments to schedule around. Emily thought about her empty Friday night, about the frozen pizza she'd probably share with Lily while they watched Disney movies for the 100th time. Thought about the fact that she couldn't remember the last time she'd done something just for herself, just because it might be interesting. Thought about the way Marco had looked at her like she mattered. Yes, she heard herself say. Tell Mr. Bellini I accept. Excellent. The car will arrive at 6:30. Dress is formal. Have a lovely day, Miss Carter. The line went dead before Emily could ask any of the 1,000 questions suddenly flooding her mind. She called her best friend Sarah immediately. You said yes to what? Sarah's voice pitched high with disbelief. Em, are you insane? Probably. Emily was pacing the small break room, her half-eaten sandwich forgotten. But Sarah, you should have seen him at the wedding. He was different, kind, real, somehow, even though everything about him screamed money and power. Everything about him screams red flags. You don't know anything about this guy except that he can afford to throw money around, and he apparently has people who arrange childcare for his dates. That's not romantic, that's controlling. Or it's thoughtful. He knew I'd worry about Lily. Em. Sarah's voice softened. I love you. You know I do. But you have the worst judgment when it comes to men. Remember Ryan? Remember how charming he seemed at first? The comparison stung because it wasn't entirely unfair. Ryan had seemed perfect in the beginning too. Attentive, successful, interested in her in ways that made her feel special. It had taken months for the cracks to show, for his interest to curdle into ownership, his attention into criticism. This isn't like Ryan, Emily said, but she heard the uncertainty in her own voice. Just be careful. Please, take your phone, keep it charged, and text me every hour so I know you're okay. You're being dramatic. Someone has to be, since you're apparently determined to ignore every self-preservation instinct you possess. But despite Sarah's warnings, despite her own misgivings, Emily found herself looking forward to Friday with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The childcare service arrived at 6, two women with impressive credentials and warm smiles who immediately engaged Lily in a craft project involving sparkles and construction paper. Emily retreated to her bedroom to get ready, staring at her limited wardrobe with something approaching despair. Formal. Amanda had said formal. Emily owned exactly 2 dresses that qualified, and one of them was the navy sheath she'd worn to the wedding. She pulled out the other option, a simple black dress she'd bought for Ryan's company events, back when she'd still attended those. It fit well enough, though it didn't make her feel particularly beautiful or confident. She was struggling with her hair when her phone rang. Marco. Hello? Emily? I apologize for not calling sooner. Business has been complicated this week. His voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, controlled, with that hint of warmth underneath. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with dinner tonight. Comfortable might be overstating it, Emily admitted, giving up on her hair and letting it fall loose around her shoulders. Your assistant was very efficient. Amanda is the best. She mentioned you were concerned about childcare. I'm always concerned about childcare. Single mother, remember? The service I arranged comes highly recommended. But if you'd prefer someone else, or if you want to cancel entirely, that's completely fine. This isn't meant to be stressful. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, phone pressed to her ear. Why are you doing this, Marco? We had one dance, one conversation. You don't know me. I'd like to. He paused. No pressure, no expectations. Just dinner with someone I found interesting. If that's not something you want, I understand completely. There was something in his voice, sincerity, maybe, or loneliness, that matched her own. Emily made a decision. I want to, she said quietly. I'm just nervous. So am I. You don't seem like someone who gets nervous. Then I'm better at hiding it than I thought. She heard him smile. I'll see you soon, Emily. The car arrived exactly at 6:30, a sleek black Mercedes with a driver who opened the door for her like she was someone important. Emily kissed Lily goodbye, received solemn promises that bedtime would be honored, and slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The drive to Alinea took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. Emily spent it alternating between excitement and terror, checking her phone obsessively for messages from the childcare service and trying not to think about all the ways this could go horribly wrong. Marco was waiting outside the restaurant, looking devastating in a charcoal suit that made the one he'd worn to the wedding look casual. He smiled when he saw her, genuine pleasure lighting his features, and Emily felt some of her nervousness ease. You look beautiful, he said, offering his arm. You look terrifying. He laughed. Terrifying. Like someone who belongs in magazines. I look like someone who shops at Target. Target has excellent taste, then. Marco guided her inside, where the host greeted him by name and led them to a private table in the back. The restaurant was everything Emily had heard and more. Minimalist elegance, hushed conversations, the kind of place where the menu was probably a surprise and the bill would make her cry. She felt completely out of her depth. Relax, Marco said softly as they sat. It's just dinner. Just dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in Chicago with a man I barely know who somehow got a reservation at a place that's booked months in advance. I know the owner. At her expression, he added, I know that probably sounds pretentious. I'm aware I exist in a very specific world that's disconnected from most people's reality, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate real conversation with someone who doesn't want anything from me. How do you know I don't want anything from you? Do you? Emily considered lying, playing coy, protecting herself with the kind of games she'd watched other women play. Instead, she went with honesty. I don't know what I want. I know I should probably be home with my daughter, not sitting here in a dress I've worn twice before with a man who probably has a dozen women more interesting than me available. But I'm here anyway because you made me feel something at that wedding, seen, valued. Like I was more than just Emily Carter, the daughter who disappointed everyone. Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Can I tell you something I didn't mention at the wedding? Should I be worried? Probably. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My business isn't entirely legal. The import-export I mentioned, some of it crosses lines. The consulting involves people and situations that exist in gray areas. I'm not a good man, Emily. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. Emily's heart hammered. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve honesty, and because if we're going to continue any kind of arrangement, even just as friends, you should know what you're potentially getting involved with. An arrangement, Emily repeated. Is that what this is? I don't know what this is. But I know that when I saw you sitting alone at that wedding, looking like you were enduring an execution instead of a celebration, I recognized something. Someone who doesn't quite fit in the world they're supposed to inhabit. Someone who's stronger than anyone gives them credit for. The waiter appeared with their first course, something delicate and artistic that Emily couldn't immediately identify. She waited until they were alone again before responding. If you're telling me you're dangerous, that I should run, you're doing a terrible job of it, because all I hear is someone who's lonely and tired of pretending. Marco's expression shifted, surprise maybe, or recognition. You should run. You should thank me for dinner, go home to your daughter, and forget we ever met. But you don't want me to. No, I don't. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The food was extraordinary, each course a work of art, flavors Emily had never experienced combining in ways that seemed impossible. But what she'd remember later wasn't the food. It was the conversation. Marco asked about her work, and Emily found herself describing the pediatric ward with passion she usually kept hidden. The kids who came in terrified and left laughing. The parents she counseled through their worst nightmares. The impossible balance between clinical detachment and emotional investment that every good nurse had to master. You love it, Marco observed. Not just like it, actually love it. I do. Even on the hard days, maybe especially on the hard days, because that's when it matters most. Emily paused, then asked, What do you love? Besides mysterious import-export business? Honestly, cooking. I'm good at it. Find it relaxing in a way nothing else is. You cook? Don't sound so surprised. I grew up in my grandmother's kitchen. She taught me every recipe she knew, made me practice until I could make pasta by hand with my eyes closed. His expression softened with memory. She said a man who can feed people will never be truly alone. Is she right? No, but it's a comforting lie. They talked through 7 courses, and Emily lost track of time entirely. Marco was fascinating, well-read, surprisingly funny, with stories that revealed glimpses of a life completely different from hers. He'd traveled everywhere, spoke 4 languages, had opinions on everything from architecture to wine to the best way to make risotto. But he also asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He seemed genuinely interested in Emily's opinions about healthcare reform, her thoughts on raising a daughter alone, her favorite books and movies, and the small pleasures that made her life worthwhile. It was after 10 when they finally left the restaurant, and Emily realized with shock that she'd forgotten to text Sarah updates. She fired off a quick message, "Still alive, having amazing time, we'll call tomorrow," and pocketed her phone. Can I drive you home? Marco asked. You don't have to. I'd like to. Unless you'd rather take your own car. Emily thought about the Mercedes waiting, about her cramped apartment that would look even smaller if Marco saw it, about letting this man know where she lived and inviting whatever came next. Okay, she said. But I warn you, my neighborhood isn't exactly Lincoln Park. I don't care about your neighborhood. The drive back felt shorter than it should have. Emily directed Marco to her building, a tired brick structure in Uptown that was safe enough but definitely not impressive. She expected him to just drop her off, but he parked and walked her to the entrance. Thank you for dinner, Emily said, suddenly awkward now that the evening was ending. It was incredible. All of it. Thank you for saying yes. Marco hesitated, then asked, Can I see you again? Why? Because tonight was the first time in years I've enjoyed myself without pretending. Because you're interesting and honest and you don't seem to want anything from me except conversation. Because I think we could both use a friend who exists outside our regular lives. A friend. The word felt both safe and disappointing, though Emily couldn't quite explain why. I'd like that, she said finally. Marco smiled, relieved. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture gentle and intimate. Good night, Emily. Good night. She watched him walk back to the Mercedes, watched the car pull away into Chicago traffic, and stood in the cool October air, feeling like her life had just shifted in some fundamental way. When she got upstairs, the childcare service had put Lily to bed and cleaned the apartment. Emily paid them, far more than she should have been able to afford, but Marco had apparently handled it already and collapsed onto her couch after they left. Her phone rang. Sarah. Tell me everything. So Emily did, describing the restaurant and the conversation and the way Marco looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. Sarah listened with the patience of a best friend who'd been there through everything, then delivered her verdict. He sounds perfect, which means there's definitely something wrong with him. Probably. Are you going to see him again? He asked. I said yes. Sarah sighed. Please be careful. That's all I ask. Just protect yourself. And Lily. I will. I promise. But promises made in good faith don't always account for the complications that come with them. Emily saw Marco twice more over the next week. Coffee on Monday morning before her shift, a walk along the lakefront on Thursday evening while Mrs. Chen watched Lily. Each time, Emily learned something new. Marco had lost his parents young, raised by his grandmother with a strange combination of love and necessity. He'd built his business from nothing, though he remained vague about exact details. He preferred classical music, but secretly loved terrible action movies. He was allergic to strawberries and terrified of heights, which seemed absurd for someone who radiated such control. And each time, Emily found herself drawn further into whatever this was. Not quite dating, not quite friendship. Something undefined that existed in the spaces between. On Saturday afternoon, Marco called with an unusual request. "I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "The pretend arrangement from the wedding. I need to extend it for one more evening." Emily's stomach flipped. "What are you talking about?" "There's a charity gala tonight, very formal, very public. My grandmother will be there with several of her friends who have single granddaughters they're eager to introduce. If I show up alone, I'll spend the entire evening deflecting matchmaking attempts. So bring a real date." "I'd rather bring you." "Marco, I know it's last minute. I know it's an imposition, but Emily, I trust you. You don't have an agenda. You're not trying to position yourself for something more. You're just you. And right now, that's exactly what I need." Emily should have said no. Should have recognized that this was getting complicated, that pretending to be someone's date even once more was a terrible idea when she was already catching feelings she couldn't quite name. "What time?" she asked instead. "Car picks you up at 7, and Emily, thank you." The gala was at the Field Museum, which had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. The main hall glittered with lights and elegant decorations, hundreds of Chicago's wealthiest citizens dressed in their finest. Emily wore the black dress again, feeling increasingly inadequate as she took in the designer gowns and jewelry that probably cost more than her car. Marco found her immediately, looking devastating in a tuxedo, and the relief in his eyes when he saw her was genuine. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would. There's a difference." He offered his arm, ready to convince my grandmother we're madly in love. "Madly might be overselling it." "Fine. Moderately infatuated?" "Better." They entered the gala together, and Emily felt the weight of attention shift to them immediately. Marco kept her close, introducing her to what felt like hundreds of people whose names she'd never remember. He described her as his date with casual possessiveness, and Emily played along, smiling and making polite conversation while trying not to feel completely overwhelmed. Margaret found them during cocktail hour, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "Emily, how wonderful to see you again." She kissed both of Emily's cheeks with genuine warmth. "And Marco, don't you two look lovely together?" "We're just friends, grandmother." "Of course you are, dear." Margaret's tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. "Emily, I must introduce you to some people. Do you mind if I steal her for just a moment, Marco?" Marco looked reluctant but nodded. "Don't let her interrogate you too thoroughly." Margaret led Emily away through the crowd, chattering about the event and the charity it supported, something involving children's literacy, which Emily actually cared about. But when they reached a quieter corner, Margaret's expression turned serious. "I need to ask you something, and I'd appreciate your honesty." "Of course." "Are you using my grandson?" The bluntness caught Emily off guard. "What? No, Because Marco is very wealthy and very lonely, which makes him vulnerable to people who might see opportunity. I've watched several women try to position themselves as his salvation, and it never ends well." Margaret's eyes were kind but sharp. "You seem genuine, but I've been fooled before." Emily met her gaze directly. "I'm not using him. I'm not looking for money or security or whatever else people apparently want from him. I'm a single mother who works too many hours for too little pay, and your grandson has been unexpectedly kind to me. That's all this is." "Is it?" "I think so. I don't know." Emily hesitated, then added, "I like him. More than I probably should, given that we barely know each other. But I'm not going to pretend this is something it's not, and I'm certainly not trying to trap him into anything." Margaret studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "Good. That's what I hoped you'd say." She patted Emily's hand. "Marco needs someone real in his life. Someone who sees him as a person instead of a resource. I think you might be that person. We're just friends. Keep telling yourself that, dear. They rejoined the crowd, and Emily found Marco deep in conversation with a group of men in expensive suits. She started to hang back, not wanting to interrupt, but Marco reached out and pulled her to his side without breaking his conversation. The casual intimacy of the gesture, the assumption that she belonged beside him, made Emily's heart race. The evening progressed with dinner and dancing and a charity auction that made Emily dizzy watching the sums people casually bid on various items. Marco bid $20,000 on a week at a villa in Tuscany without even blinking, which confirmed everything Emily had suspected about the vast difference in their circumstances. But he also held her hand under the table during dinner, listened to her whispered commentary about the ridiculous auction items, and laughed at her jokes like they were the funniest things he'd ever heard. They were dancing, a slow song that gave them an excuse to be close, when Emily noticed the change in Marco's posture. Subtle tension, his eyes tracking someone across the room. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. "Nothing. Just someone I didn't expect to see here." "Who?" "No one you need to worry about." But his grip on her waist tightened protectively. Emily followed his gaze and saw a man watching them from across the dance floor. Mid-40s, expensive suit, cold eyes that assessed her like she was a problem to be calculated. "Marco." The man appeared beside them as the song ended, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Didn't expect to find you here." "Dominic, I could say the same." Marco's voice was carefully neutral. "And who's this?" Dominic's attention shifted to Emily with predatory interest. "None of your concern." "Come now, we're all friends here, aren't we?" Something dangerous lurked under Dominic's pleasant tone. Marco moved slightly, positioning himself between Emily and the other man. "We're leaving. Enjoy the rest of your evening." He guided Emily away quickly, not quite running, but close to it. They collected her wrap and were in the Mercedes before Emily could fully process what had just happened. "Who was that?" she demanded once they were moving. "Someone from my other life. The parts I told you existed but didn't elaborate on." "Marco, he's dangerous, Emily, and he saw you with me, which means you're now potentially on his radar, which is exactly what I was trying to avoid by keeping this casual." Fear crept up Emily's spine. "Should I be worried?" Marco was quiet for too long. "I don't know, probably not. Dominic and I have an understanding, but he likes to test boundaries, likes to find weaknesses he can exploit. And you think I'm a weakness? I think anything I care about becomes a potential liability in my world." The admission hung between them, that he cared, that this had become more than just a convenient arrangement. Emily should have been scared, should have demanded to be taken home immediately and insisted they never see each other again. Instead, she asked, "What do we do?" "We?" "Emily, there's no we here. This was supposed to be simple. A few dinners, some mutually beneficial company, nothing complicated." "Bit late for that." Marco's jaw clenched. "I should take you home. This was a mistake." "Was it? Because it didn't feel like a mistake when you were holding my hand at dinner, or when you looked at me like I was the only person in the room." "Emily, just tell me the truth. Do you want to stop seeing me?" The Mercedes pulled up to a red light. Marco turned to look at her fully, and the conflict in his eyes was clear even in the dim light. "No, I don't want to stop seeing you, which is exactly why I should." The light changed. They drove the rest of the way to Emily's apartment in tense silence. When Marco walked her to the door this time, Emily stopped him before he could leave. "I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break because your life is complicated. I've survived a failed marriage, single motherhood, family judgment, and financial struggles that would crush most people. I can handle whatever this is." "You shouldn't have to." "Maybe not, but maybe I want to anyway." Marco reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You have no idea what you're saying yes to." "Then explain it to me. Stop protecting me and just be honest." He dropped his hand, stepped back. "I'll call you Marco." "I need to think, Emily, about what's fair to you, what's safe." He smiled sadly. "Good night." Emily watched him leave for the second time, and this time it felt different, like an ending instead of a pause. She paid the babysitter, a different service, equally professional, and checked on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Emily stood in the doorway of their shared bedroom, watching her daughter breathe, and wondered what the hell she was doing. Getting involved with a man who admitted his business wasn't legal, who had people like Dominic in his life, who could afford charity galas and Michelin star restaurants, but apparently couldn't figure out how to have a normal relationship. Her phone buzzed. Sarah. How was the gala? Emily texted back. Complicated. We'll explain tomorrow. But explaining would require understanding it herself first, and Emily wasn't sure she did. She changed into pajamas, washed her face, brushed her teeth, went through all the motions of normal life while her mind spun with questions that had no good answers. Marco didn't call the next day, or the day after that. By Wednesday, Emily had convinced herself it was over, whatever it had been. A brief, strange interlude in her ordinary life. A reminder that some worlds don't mix, no matter how much you might want them to. She was leaving work Thursday evening, exhausted from a double shift, when she noticed the black Mercedes parked outside the hospital entrance. Marco got out when he saw her, and Emily's traitorous heart leapt. "We need to talk," he said. "That's never a good opening line." "I know. Can I buy you coffee? There's a place around the corner." They walked in silence to a small cafe that Emily had been to 100 times, usually grabbing a quick espresso between shifts. It felt surreal to be there with Marco, this man who belonged in elegant restaurants and charity galas, sitting in a vinyl booth under fluorescent lights. "I've spent the last 4 days trying to convince myself to walk away from this," Marco said without preamble. "From you. For your own good. And I can't do it, which makes me incredibly selfish, but there it is." Emily wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "What are you suggesting?" "That we keep seeing each other, but that you understand the risks. My world isn't safe, Emily. People like Dominic exist in it, and they don't play by normal rules. If you're associated with me, that changes things for you. Maybe makes you a target." "For what?" "Leverage. Information. A way to get to me." Marco's expression was grim. "I can provide protection. Security. But I can't guarantee nothing will ever happen." "You're really selling this." "I'm being honest." "Which you said you wanted." Emily was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Lily, about the life they'd built that was small but safe, about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. "What if I said yes anyway?" she asked finally. "Then I'd do everything in my power to keep you safe. Both of you." "Both?" "You and Lily. I'm not naive enough to think I can be part of your life without considering your daughter. She comes first. Always." Something in Emily's chest cracked open. Ryan had resented Lily from the start, seen her as an obligation rather than a gift. Marco had met her daughter exactly 0 times, but somehow already understood the fundamental truth that Emily and Lily were a package deal. "I need time to think about this," Emily said. "Of course. Take all the time you need. And I need to know more. About your business. About what I'd actually be getting into." Marco nodded slowly. "That's fair. What do you want to know?" "Everything." So he told her. Not everything. Emily suspected there were details he left out, probably for her own protection, but he explained the legitimate businesses he ran, the restaurants and real estate investments that provided cover for other activities. The shipments that came through ports he controlled, some legal, some less so. The network of people who owed him favors, who relied on him for protection, or opportunity, or both. He painted a picture of a world Emily had only seen in movies, where power was currency and loyalty meant everything. A world where violence was rare but always possible, where trust was earned through actions rather than words, where Marco occupied a position of authority that required constant vigilance. "So you're basically a crime boss," Emily said when he finished. "That's an oversimplification, but not entirely inaccurate. And you're telling me this because you want me to what? Join your organization? I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who I actually am before you decide whether to keep seeing me. I'm not looking for a partner in business, Emily. I'm looking for someone who sees me as more than the role I play." Emily studied him across the scarred table of the cheap cafe, this complicated man who could be tender and dangerous in the same breath. "I need to think," she said finally. "This is a lot." "I know, and whatever you decide, I'll respect it." They parted ways outside the cafe, and Emily took the train home alone, her mind spinning with impossible choices. She had no way of knowing that her decision wouldn't matter, that events were already in motion that would force them together whether she chose it or not, that sometimes safety is an illusion, and the most dangerous choice is thinking you have one at all. Emily spent the weekend wrestling with her decision, watching Lily play in their small living room while her mind replayed everything Marco had told her. She made lists of pros and cons like the practical nurse she was, trying to quantify something that felt entirely beyond logic. On one side, danger, complications, a world she didn't understand. On the other, the way Marco looked at her, the possibility of something real, the first genuine connection she'd felt since her divorce. By Sunday evening, she still hadn't reached a conclusion. Monday morning started normally enough. Emily dropped Lily at Little Scholars Preschool on her way to work, the same routine they'd followed for 8 months. Lily kissed her goodbye with sticky fingers, they'd had pancakes for breakfast again, and ran inside to join her friends at the art table. Emily watched through the window for a moment, as she always did, then headed to the hospital for her shift. She was 3 hours into her rounds, checking on a 7-year-old with pneumonia, when her phone rang. The preschool's number. Emily's stomach dropped. They never called unless something was wrong. "Ms. Carter?" The director's voice was strained, professionally calm in a way that immediately terrified Emily. "I need you to come pick up Lily right away." "Is she sick? Hurt?" Emily was already moving toward the nurse's station, gesturing to her supervisor that she needed to leave. "She's fine, but there's been an incident. Some men came to the school asking about her. They didn't try to take her or anything, but they were asking very specific questions about her schedule, about you, about who picks her up. Our staff followed protocol and refused to provide information, but Ms. Carter, I think you should come get her now." The world tilted sideways. "What kind of men?" "I don't know how to describe them, except that they seemed official but not quite right. They showed some kind of identification, but it looked fake. Our head teacher called the police, but by the time officers arrived, the men were gone." Emily's hands shook as she grabbed her coat. "I'm coming right now. Don't let anyone near her, no one except me." "Of course. We've moved her to the office and locked all the doors." The drive from Northwestern to the preschool normally took 20 minutes. Emily made it in 12, running 2 red lights and not caring about the honks from other drivers. Her mind spiraled with terrible possibilities, each one worse than the last. This was because of Marco. Had to be. Someone from his world, someone like Dominic, making a move, using her daughter, her innocent 5-year-old daughter, as leverage. Lily was sitting in the director's office when Emily burst through the door, coloring a picture with fierce concentration like nothing unusual had happened. When she saw her mother, her face lit up. "Mama, look! I drew a butterfly!" Emily swept her into her arms, holding her so tight that Lily squirmed. "Mama, you're squishing me." "Sorry, baby. Sorry." Emily loosened her grip but didn't let go, breathing in the scent of her daughter's strawberry shampoo and fighting back tears. "Are you okay? Did anyone talk to you?" "No. Mrs. Patterson said I got to have special office time and I could use all the good markers." Lily showed her the picture proudly. The purple ones and everything. The director approached carefully. "The men never got past the front desk. Our protocol worked exactly as designed. But Ms. Carter, I need to ask, is there something going on that we should know about? In custody dispute, perhaps? Or—" "No, nothing like that." Emily's mind raced. "My ex-husband has limited visitation, but he'd never send strangers. This is something else. Should we increase security measures? Perhaps require additional identification for anyone picking Lily up?" "Yes, all of that. I'll provide you with a list of approved people. It'll be me and my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. That's it. No one else gets near her." Emily gathered Lily's things, signed her out early, and carried her daughter to the car. She was buckling her into the car seat when her phone rang again. Marco. "Not now," she started to say, but he interrupted immediately. "Are you and Lily safe?" Emily's blood ran cold. "How did you know?" "I have people watching your daughter's preschool. They reported the incident. Emily, where are you right now?" "In the parking lot. I just picked her up." "Good. Stay there. I'm sending someone to escort you home." "No! Marco, what the hell is happening? Who were those men?" I'll explain everything, I promise. But right now, I need you to trust me. Someone is making a move, and I need to get both of you somewhere safe until I figure out who and why. Emily looked at Lily in the back seat, happily singing to herself, completely unaware that her world had just shifted into something dangerous. Every maternal instinct Emily possessed screamed at her to drive away, to take her daughter and run somewhere Marco Bellini and his complicated world could never find them. Emily, please, let me help. This is your fault, she said, voice breaking. They came after my daughter because of you. I know, and I will fix this, I swear, but I can't do that if I'm worried about whether you're safe. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. Please. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot, and Emily recognized the driver from the night of the gala, one of Marco's people. Is that yours? She asked. Yes. His name is Vincent. He's been with me for 12 years, and I trust him with my life. More importantly, I trust him with yours. Emily watched Vincent approach, his movements careful and non-threatening. He stopped several feet from her car and waited, hands visible, giving her time to decide. Where would we go? Emily asked Marco quietly. My apartment. It's the most secure location I have. No one gets in without passing through 3 layers of security, and I have people I trust watching every entrance. For how long? I don't know yet. A few days at least while I handle this. Emily closed her eyes, thinking about work, about their apartment, about the normal life she'd been so desperate to maintain. All of it felt impossibly far away now. Okay, she whispered. But Marco, if anything happens to my daughter because of this, it won't. I promise you, Emily, nothing will happen to either of you. Vincent drove them through Chicago with careful attention to their surroundings, occasionally speaking into an earpiece in a language Emily didn't recognize. Lily thought it was an adventure, pressing her face against the window to watch the city pass by. Where are we going, Mama? To a friend's house for a little while. Is it a fun house? I don't know, sweetie. We'll find out together. Marco's building was in the Gold Coast, a gleaming tower that probably had more security than most government facilities. Vincent drove them into an underground garage where Marco was waiting beside a private elevator. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usual composure fractured around the edges. When he saw them, relief flooded his features. Thank you for trusting me, he said quietly as Emily got out of the SUV. I'm not sure I do, but I don't have a lot of options right now. Marco's attention shifted to Lily, who was peeking out from behind Emily's legs with wide-eyed curiosity. He crouched down to her level, making himself smaller and less intimidating. Hi there. You must be Lily. I'm Marco. You're tall, Lily observed. I am, and you're very observant. He smiled gently. I hear you like to draw. I have a whole art supplies closet upstairs if you want to use it. Lily's eyes went huge. A whole closet. My grandmother likes to paint. She keeps everything at my place so she can work on her art when she visits. Can I see? Absolutely. Let's go upstairs and I'll show you around. The elevator opened directly into Marco's penthouse, and Emily tried not to gape at the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, the afternoon sun turning the water to hammered gold. The furniture was expensive but comfortable, the kind of place that was meant to be lived in despite its obvious luxury. Bookshelves lined one wall, and Emily spotted cookbooks mixed in with Italian literature and what looked like first editions of American classics. Guest room is this way, Marco said, leading them down a hallway. It has its own bathroom, and the bed is comfortable. Lily can stay with you, or there's another room if she wants her own space. I want to stay with Mama, Lily said firmly. That works perfectly. Marco opened a door to reveal a beautiful room decorated in soft blues and grays. I'll have Vincent bring up some clothes and things from your apartment. Just make a list of what you need. Emily set down the bag she'd hastily packed at the preschool. Marco, we need to talk, now. I know, let me just... He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Moments later, Margaret appeared in the doorway, looking exactly like the grandmother she was. Warm, capable, ready to help. Emily, dear, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. She turned to Lily with a bright smile. And you must be Lily. I'm Margaret. Your mom and I met at a wedding. Would you like to help me make cookies while the grown-ups talk boring things? Lily looked to Emily for permission. Emily wanted to say no, wanted to keep her daughter within arm's reach every second. But Lily needed normalcy, needed to not absorb the fear currently coursing through Emily's veins. Okay, baby. But you stay with Mrs. Margaret and do exactly what she says. I will. Lily took Margaret's offered hand eagerly. What kind of cookies? Whatever kind you want, sweetheart. Chocolate chip? Oatmeal raisin? Chocolate chip with lots of chips. They disappeared toward what Emily assumed was the kitchen, and suddenly she was alone with Marco in the elegant guest room, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on her all at once. Who were they? She demanded. Who came to my daughter's preschool? Marco ran a hand through his hair, a crack in his usual controlled demeanor. I don't know yet, but I have people finding out. Emily, I need you to understand something. This isn't how things work in my world. Going after children, threatening families, that crosses lines that even people like Dominic don't usually cross. Usually? There are rules, unwritten but understood. You don't target kids, you don't involve people who aren't part of the life. Whoever did this either doesn't know those rules or doesn't care about them. And that's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to help you understand how seriously I'm taking this. Marco's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. Someone is trying to send me a message, and they're using you to do it. That ends now. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can make it very clear that touching you or your daughter again will have consequences severe enough that no one will risk it. Emily sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. I should never have gotten involved with you. I knew better. Sarah warned me. My own instincts warned me. And I did it anyway because you made me feel special for 5 seconds. Marco flinched like she'd struck him. You're right. This is my fault. All of it. And if I could go back to that wedding and walk away from you, never speak to you, keep you safe from all of this. He stopped, looked away. I should have, but I didn't. And now we're here. So what happens now? Now you stay here while I handle this. A few days, maybe a week. I'll have people watching your apartment, your work, everywhere you normally go. Once I've dealt with whoever's responsible and made it clear that you're under my protection, you'll be able to go back to your normal life. Under your protection, Emily repeated, like I'm some kind of possession. Like you're someone I care about who's in danger because of me. Marco's voice was rough. Emily, I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but please let me fix this. And if you can't? Then I'll make other arrangements, somewhere safe, far from Chicago, where you and Lily can start over and never have to worry about my world touching yours again. Emily looked up at him, this man who'd turned her life upside down in the space of 3 weeks. I don't want to start over somewhere else. I have a job I love, friends, a life. It's not perfect, but it's mine. I know, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you get to keep it. A crash from the kitchen made them both jump, followed by Lily's delighted laughter and Margaret's warm voice reassuring her that dropping flour was part of the fun of baking. She sounds happy, Emily said quietly. My grandmother has that effect on people. Marco moved to sit beside her on the bed, careful to maintain distance. Emily, I need to leave for a while. There are people I need to talk to, information I need to gather. Vincent will be here and 2 other men I trust. They'll keep you safe. How long? A few hours. I'll be back before dinner. He hesitated. Will you be okay here? Emily wanted to say no, wanted to demand he stay or let her leave or turn back time to before any of this started. Instead, she nodded. We'll be fine. Just be careful. Always am. He stood, then paused at the door. Thank you for trusting me with this. After he left, Emily sat alone in the guest room for long minutes, trying to process everything. Then she pulled out her phone and called Sarah. Oh, thank God, Sarah answered immediately. I've been trying to reach you for an hour. Where are you? I'm safe. Lily's safe. But Sarah, it's complicated. Complicated how? What's going on? So Emily explained, leaving out the specific details about Marco's business, but conveying enough that Sarah understood the danger was real. You need to call the police, Sarah said immediately. File a report, get protection. The preschool already called the police. They took a report, but what are they going to do? Watch Lily's school 24/7? The men who came are probably long gone. So you're just going to hide out with your crime boss boyfriend and hope he handles it? He's not my boyfriend, and I don't have a lot of other options right now. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Em, I'm scared for you. This isn't normal danger. This is the kind of thing people don't come back from. I know. Believe me, I know. But Marco promised he'd fix it. And you believe him? Emily thought about Marco's expression when he'd seen them arrive safely, the controlled fury in his voice when he'd talked about someone crossing lines. Yeah, I think I do. Then I hope you're right, because if you're wrong, Lily loses her mother. The words hit like a physical blow. Emily closed her eyes against sudden tears. I have to go. I'll call you later. She found Lily and Margaret in the massive kitchen, both covered in flour, a tray of misshapen cookies baking in the oven. Lily was chattering about her favorite cartoons while Margaret listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at her stories. Mama, look, we made cookies. Mrs. Margaret says I'm a natural baker. That's wonderful, baby. Emily caught Margaret's eye over Lily's head, and the older woman's expression was kind. She's delightful, Margaret said. Reminds me of Marco at that age, actually. Same fearless enthusiasm. Marco was fearless as a child? Absolutely terrifying. Margaret smiled at the memory. Climbed everything, questioned everything, believed he could do anything. His mother used to say he was going to give her gray hair before 30. What happened to his parents? Emily asked quietly, aware this was probably not appropriate conversation, but needing to know more about the man who'd pulled her into his dangerous world. Margaret's expression clouded. Car accident when he was 12, a rainy night, a drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time. They both died instantly. That's terrible. It was. Marco changed after that. Got quieter, more careful, started building walls around himself that I've spent 20 years trying to break through. She glanced at Lily, who was investigating the contents of the refrigerator. You might be the first person I've seen him let past those walls since his parents died. I don't think he let me past anything. I think I just happened to be there when he needed someone real. Perhaps, but the result is the same. Margaret began cleaning up the baking mess, her movements efficient. Emily, I know this situation is frightening, but you should know that Marco doesn't make promises lightly. If he said he'll keep you safe, he will, even if it costs him everything. That's what I'm afraid of. The afternoon crawled by. Emily tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to do anything that would distract from the anxiety gnawing at her insides. Lily was content with the art supplies Marco had promised, spreading out on the living room floor to create elaborate drawings with markers Margaret produced from the mysterious closet. Vincent checked in periodically, his presence a quiet reminder that they needed protection. Emily caught him having terse conversations in that same unfamiliar language, his expression growing grimmer with each call. Is Marco okay? She finally asked, after one particularly intense exchange. Vincent looked surprised to be addressed directly. He's handling things. Should be back soon. That's not what I asked. No, ma'am, but it's the answer I'm authorized to give. Lily fell asleep on the couch around 6, worn out from the unusual day. Emily covered her with a soft blanket and stood watching her daughter sleep, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Marco returned just after 7, looking exhausted and angry. He went straight to Emily, checking her over like he needed physical confirmation she was unharmed. Did you find out who they were? Emily asked. Yes. Let's talk in my office. He led her to a room lined with books and expensive electronics, closing the door behind them. Through the window, the city sprawled in every direction, millions of lights marking millions of lives that weren't currently imploding. It was Dominic, Marco said without preamble. He decided you were a vulnerability and sent men to your daughter's school to prove it. Why? Because I've been refusing to work with him on a shipment he wants to bring through my ports. He's trying to leverage you to force my cooperation. Emily's hands clenched into fists. So this is about business. It's about power, about him proving he can get to me through the people I care about. Marco's voice was hard. I had a conversation with him an hour ago that made it very clear that touching you or Lily again would be the last mistake he ever made. What kind of conversation? The kind that doesn't leave room for misinterpretation. Emily studied him, this man who could apparently threaten someone's life with such casual certainty. Did you hurt him? No, but I made him understand that I would if he continued down this path. Marco's expression softened slightly. Emily, Dominic is a bully. He pushes boundaries to see what he can get away with. But he's not suicidal. Now that he knows you're genuinely important to me, he'll back off. How can you be sure? Because everyone in our world understands the rules. You don't touch another man's family. The moment I made it clear that's what you are, you became off limits. I'm not your family. Marco met her eyes directly. Aren't you? The question hung between them, weighted with implications Emily wasn't ready to examine. I need to call work, she said instead. Let them know I won't be in for a few days. Already handled. I had someone call and explain you had a family emergency. You can't just handle everything. I can and I will. Emily, please. Let me take care of this. Let me take care of you. She wanted to argue, to insist she could manage her own life. But the truth was she was terrified and exhausted, and the idea of letting someone else carry the weight for a little while was overwhelmingly tempting. Okay, she whispered. But Marco, this can't keep happening. I can't live like this, always wondering when the next threat will come. You won't have to. I'm making arrangements. Once this is settled, I'll make sure everyone knows you're protected. It'll be clear enough that no one will risk coming after you again. And if they do anyway, then I'll handle it, whatever it takes. Margaret appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready. I made pasta, and Lily's already setting the table like a little professional. They ate together in Marco's formal dining room, an oddly domestic scene given the circumstances. Lily chattered about the cookies they'd made, about the art supplies she wanted to use tomorrow, about whether Marco had any pets. No pets, Marco said, smiling at her enthusiasm. But my grandmother has a cat at her house. Big orange one named Pumpkin. Can I meet Pumpkin? Absolutely. Next time you visit her, she'll introduce you. Emily watched the easy interaction between Marco and her daughter, the way he engaged with Lily without condescension, treating her questions and observations with genuine interest. Ryan had never been like this, had always treated Lily like an inconvenience rather than a person. After dinner, Emily put Lily to bed in the guest room, reading her 3 stories before her daughter finally fell asleep. When she emerged, she found Marco alone in the living room, staring out at the city with a glass of whiskey in his hand. She's asleep, Emily said quietly. Good. She seems like a resilient kid. She is, but she shouldn't have to be. Emily sat on the couch, suddenly aware of how close they were, alone together in the dim light. Marco, I need to ask you something. Anything. When this is over, when Lily and I can go back to our normal lives, what happens with us? Marco was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to happen? I don't know. A week ago, I would have said we should probably stop seeing each other. Too complicated, too dangerous, too many differences. But now, she trailed off, unable to articulate the shift that had occurred. Now you've seen the worst parts of my world, and you're still here. I'm here because I don't have much choice. You have every choice, Emily. I could arrange protection for you, even if you never wanted to see me again. You're staying because some part of you wants to. He wasn't wrong. Despite everything, the fear, the danger, the complete upheaval of her carefully managed life, she didn't want to walk away from him. I must be insane, she said. Probably. Marco set down his glass and moved to sit beside her. For what it's worth, I think I am too. I've spent 20 years carefully avoiding any kind of genuine connection, and then you show up at a wedding looking miserable. And somehow, that was it. You became the one thing I couldn't walk away from. That's a lot of pressure. I don't mean it to be. I'm just trying to be honest. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly familiar from that first night. I know this is complicated. I know I've brought danger into your life that you never asked for. But Emily, I meant what I said earlier. You and Lily are my family now, and I protect my family. Emily leaned into his touch without thinking. I'm scared. Me too. Of what? Of how much you've come to matter. Of what I'd do if something happened to you. His hand cupped her face gently. Of how completely you've upended everything I thought I understood about myself. They were close now. Close enough that Emily could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath. Close enough that when he leaned in, she didn't pull away. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both testing whether this was real. Then Emily's hands found their way to his shoulders, and Marco pulled her closer, and gentle became something deeper. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emily rested her forehead against his. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "The worst," he agreed. "Should we stop?" "Probably." But she didn't move, and neither did he. They stayed like that for a long moment, the city lights glittering beyond the windows, the rest of the world temporarily forgotten. Finally, Emily pulled back. "I should check on Lily." "Of course." She stood, smoothing down her shirt, trying to regain some sense of equilibrium. At the doorway, she paused. "Marco? Yeah? Thank you for protecting us, for caring enough to try." "Always." Emily went to bed that night in the guest room, Lily sleeping peacefully beside her, and stared at the ceiling for hours. Her mind replayed the kiss, the conversation, the impossible situation she'd somehow found herself in. She must have eventually fallen asleep because she woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Marco in the kitchen making pancakes while Lily sat on the counter supervising. "You're doing it wrong," Lily informed him seriously. "Mama makes them rounder." "These are rustic pancakes, very artistic." Marco flipped one with a flourish. "See? Perfect. They're lumpy. Charmingly lumpy." Emily leaned against the doorway, watching them, and felt something in her chest expand with an emotion she was afraid to name. This could be her life. This warmth, this laughter, this sense of being part of something bigger than just her and Lily, struggling alone. If she was brave enough to choose it, if the danger passed and Marco's promises held, if she could learn to exist in his world without losing herself. Marco looked up and saw her, and his smile was so genuine that Emily's breath caught. "Morning, coffee, please." They spent the day in the penthouse, Emily, Lily, Marco, and periodically Margaret, who seemed to have appointed herself unofficial grandmother to Lily. They watched movies, played games, ate the lumpy pancakes that were actually delicious. Vincent and the other security remained a quiet presence, reminders that this wasn't just a normal day despite how it felt. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Marco received a call. Emily watched his expression darken as he listened, saw his jaw clench with barely suppressed fury. "When?" he demanded. Then, "I'll handle it." He hung up and turned to Emily. "There's been a development." "What kind of development?" "Dominic has your cousin, the one who was at the wedding, Jessica. He's using her as leverage, demanding a meeting." Emily's blood turned to ice. "Is she hurt?" "No, not yet. But he's made it clear that will change if I don't agree to his terms." "What terms?" "The shipment I refuse to help with, plus a public acknowledgement that he can touch my people without consequences." Marco's voice was hard, "Neither of which I can agree to without looking weak to everyone else in our world." "So what do we do?" "We?" "Emily, this isn't your problem. She's my cousin, and she's in danger because of me, because Dominic is using her to get to you through me. That makes it absolutely my problem." Marco studied her for a long moment. "This is going to be dangerous. I don't care. Tell me what we're going to do." So he did, laying out a plan that was risky and complicated and would require Emily to be braver than she'd ever been in her life. And despite every rational instinct screaming at her to refuse, to let Marco handle it alone, Emily heard herself agree. Because sometimes loving someone means walking into danger beside them. And somewhere between that first dance and this moment, Emily had fallen in love with Marco Bellini, whether she was ready to admit it or not. The warehouse sat on the edge of the industrial district near the old stockyards, a hulking skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows that looked abandoned even in daylight. At midnight, with fog rolling in from the lake, it looked like something from a nightmare. Emily sat in the back of the Mercedes with Marco, watching the building through tinted windows while her heart hammered against her ribs. "You don't have to do this," Marco said for the third time in the past hour. "I can go in alone, handle Dominic, get Jessica out. You and Lily can stay at the penthouse with Margaret and my security team." "We've been over this." Emily's voice was steadier than she felt. "Dominic specifically demanded I be there. He wants to prove he can control you by controlling me. If I don't show, he might hurt Jessica. If you do show, he might hurt you. Then you'll have to make sure he doesn't. She met Marco's eyes in the dim light. I trust you to keep me safe. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability breaking through the controlled mask he'd worn since planning this meeting. Emily, if anything happens to you, it won't. You promised, remember? She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. Besides, I'm not the same scared woman who sat alone at that wedding 3 weeks ago. You helped me find something I'd lost. I'm not going to hide while someone I care about faces danger alone. Marco lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. When this is over, we're going to have a serious conversation about your definition of self-preservation. Looking forward to it. Vincent appeared at the car window, his expression grim. They're ready for you. Dominic has 6 men visible, probably more hidden. Jessica is inside, unharmed for now. He's set up in the main warehouse space. Marco nodded, his entire demeanor shifting from the man who'd made pancakes with Lily that morning to something harder, more dangerous. This was the Marco who ran an empire built on carefully balanced power, who could make threats that changed men's behavior with a single conversation. Stay close to me, he told Emily as they exited the car. Don't speak unless I tell you to, and if things go wrong, Vincent will get you out. Don't argue, don't try to help me, just go. Marco, promise me, Emily, please. She wanted to argue, to insist she wouldn't leave him regardless of what happened. But the fear in his eyes stopped her. I promise. They walked toward the warehouse entrance, Vincent and 2 other men flanking them like shadows. Emily focused on breathing steadily, on not showing the terror currently threatening to overwhelm her completely. She'd faced down angry parents, held dying children, worked through emergencies that would break most people. She could do this. The warehouse interior was exactly as decrepit as the outside suggested, all crumbling concrete and exposed steel beams. Portable lights had been set up in the center of the space, creating an island of harsh illumination in the surrounding darkness. Dominic stood in the middle of that light like he was on stage, Jessica bound to a chair beside him. Emily's cousin looked terrified but unhurt, her mascara smeared from crying but no visible bruises or injuries. When she saw Emily, her eyes went wide with a mixture of relief and horror. Emily, oh my God, what are you doing here? Silence, Dominic said mildly, and Jessica flinched. He turned his attention to Marco and Emily as they approached. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Marco stopped just outside the circle of light, keeping Emily slightly behind him. Let her go, Dominic. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it. Have I? Dominic smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Because from where I'm standing, you still seem to think you can dictate terms to me. That your ports are somehow off limits to my business. That you can refuse my requests without consequences. The shipment you wanted to move contains products I don't allow through my territory. That's not negotiable. Everything is negotiable, Marco. That's the fundamental truth of our world. You just need the right leverage. Dominic's gaze shifted to Emily, assessing and cold. And now I have it. Emily felt Marco tense beside her, felt the barely controlled fury radiating from him like heat. Jessica has nothing to do with our business. Neither does Emily. They're civilians. No such thing as civilians, not anymore. Not when you decided to parade this nurse around at public events, making it clear she matters to you. Dominic moved closer to Jessica, resting a hand on her shoulder in a mockery of comfort. Did you know your cousin here tried to bargain for her release? Offered me money, connections, all sorts of interesting information about your family. Quite resourceful. Please, Jessica sobbed. Please, I just want to go home. I didn't do anything wrong. Of course you didn't, sweetheart. You're just useful. Dominic looked back at Marco. So here's how this works. You agree to let my shipment through your ports, no questions asked. You publicly acknowledge that you made a mistake in refusing my initial request, and you ensure that everyone knows I'm someone who gets what I want, when I want it. And if I refuse, then this lovely young woman suffers the consequences of your stubbornness, and after that, maybe we have another conversation about your nurse and her adorable daughter. The threat hung in the air like poison. Emily saw Marco's hands clench into fists, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes as he weighed options and outcomes. You made a mistake bringing them into this, Marco said quietly, and something in his voice made Dominic's men shift nervously. A serious mistake. Did I? because from here it looks like I'm holding all the cards. You're holding two innocent women hostage, which makes you look weak and desperate to everyone watching this situation unfold. You're threatening a child, which violates every rule we operate under. And you're assuming I'll negotiate with someone who's proven they can't be trusted to honor boundaries. Dominic's smile faded. You're in no position to lecture me about rules, Bellini. Actually, I'm in the perfect position, because unlike you, I understand that power isn't just about force. It's about respect, about knowing which lines you don't cross even when you could. Marco took a step forward, and Emily saw Dominic's men raise their weapons slightly. You want my ports? You want public acknowledgement? Then let these women go and we'll negotiate like professionals instead of playing these games. The games are the point. I need everyone to know that I can get to you, that your protection means nothing when I decide to take something from you. Then you've already lost. Marco's voice was flat, certain, because every person in our world is watching this situation right now and they're not seeing strength. They're seeing a man so insecure in his own power that he has to threaten children and kidnap innocent women to feel important. Emily watched Dominic's expression darken with rage, watched his control start to slip. This was the dangerous part of Marco's plan, the moment where things could go catastrophically wrong. You think you're so much better than me? Dominic snarled. So noble with your rules and boundaries? You're just as dirty as I am, Bellini, just as willing to do whatever it takes. The difference is, I know where to draw the line. You clearly don't. Dominic's hand moved to his jacket, and Emily's heart stopped. But before he could pull whatever weapon he was reaching for, she heard herself speak. Stop. Every head turned toward her. Marco shot her a warning look, but Emily stepped forward anyway, moving past his protective stance into the harsh light. Stop, she repeated, her voice stronger now. Both of you, just stop for a second and think about what you're doing. Emily, Marco said warnly. No, let her speak. Dominic looked amused. I'm curious what the little nurse has to say about all this. Emily moved closer to Jessica, her eyes on Dominic. You want to prove you have power? That you can get to Marco through the people he cares about? Fine, you've proven it. We're all here, scared and vulnerable, exactly like you wanted. Congratulations. Emily, what are you doing? Jessica whispered. But here's what I don't understand, Emily continued, ignoring her cousin. What happens after this? Let's say Marco gives you what you want, lets your shipment through, publicly acknowledges your power. Then what? Everyone in your world knows you had to threaten innocent people to get it. They know you couldn't negotiate based on the strength of your own position, that you needed hostages and fear tactics instead of actual leverage. I have all the leverage I need. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look desperate, like someone who's losing control and doesn't know how to get it back except by hurting people who can't fight back. Emily was fully aware she was taking a massive risk, that this could backfire spectacularly, but she'd spent her entire career de-escalating situations, talking down scared patients and overwhelmed parents. This was just another terrified bully, and she knew how to handle those. You have no idea what you're talking about, Dominic said, but something in his voice suggested she'd struck a nerve. I think I do. I think you're scared that people in your world see Marco as stronger, smarter, more worthy of respect. And instead of building your own reputation on actual accomplishments, you're trying to tear us down by attacking people who have nothing to do with your business. Emily moved even closer, until she was standing directly between Dominic and Jessica. But that's not how respect works. That's how you make enemies. That's how you ensure that even if you win this battle, you've lost the war. As Emily, please stop talking, Marco said tightly. But Emily couldn't stop. Not now. My cousin is a marketing executive who has nothing to do with any of this. I'm a pediatric nurse. My daughter is 5 years old, and her biggest concern yesterday was whether she'd get to use the good markers. We're not threats to you. We're not challenges to your power. We're just people trying to live our lives, and you're using us as weapons in a fight that has nothing to do with us. That's where you're wrong. Dominic's voice was dangerous now. Everything has to do with everything in our world. Every connection is a potential weakness. Every relationship a vulnerability to exploit. Then your world is broken. Emily said it simply, without judgment. If you can't let people exist outside of your games, If every human connection is just another tactical consideration, then you've already lost the things that actually matter. And no amount of power or respect or fear is going to fill that emptiness. Silence fell over the warehouse. Dominic stared at Emily like she'd grown a second head, clearly not used to being spoken to this way. Marco looked torn between admiration and absolute terror at what she was doing. "You have courage," Dominic said finally. "Stupid courage, but courage nonetheless." "I have nothing left to lose by being honest," Emily replied. "You've already threatened everything I care about. What else can you do?" "Quite a lot, actually." "I know, but you won't." Emily softened her voice, gentled her approach. "Because deep down, you know I'm right. This isn't making you look strong. It's making you look afraid. And the more you push this, the worse it gets for your reputation." She watched the calculation happening behind Dominic's eyes, saw him weighing his options. This was the crucial moment, the point where he either doubled down on his threats or found a face-saving way to back down. "Marco," Emily said without looking away from Dominic, "what if there was a way for everyone to walk away from this without looking weak? What if both of you could get something you wanted without anyone having to lose?" "I'm listening," Marco said carefully. "Dominic wants respect and acknowledgement that he's powerful enough to challenge you. You want Jessica and me safe, and you want to maintain the boundaries of your business. What if instead of forcing a confrontation, you both showed that you're strong enough to negotiate a solution that serves everyone's interests?" "That's not how our world works," Dominic said. "Maybe it should be. Maybe the truly powerful people are the ones who can find solutions instead of just creating more problems." Emily finally looked away from Dominic to Jessica. "My cousin is terrified and wants to go home. I want my daughter to grow up without having to worry about things like this. Marco wants to run his business according to his principles, and you want respect. None of those things are actually in conflict unless we make them be." Marco stepped forward to stand beside Emily, and she felt his presence like an anchor. "She's right. We can end this without more threats or violence. You let Jessica go. I acknowledge publicly that you're someone whose concerns deserve serious consideration, and we sit down like professionals to discuss terms that don't involve crossing the lines neither of us should cross." "That's not enough," Dominic said, but his voice had lost some of its hard edge. "It's more than you had an hour ago. An hour ago, you were the guy who kidnaps people and threatens children. Now you have a chance to be the guy who negotiated a solution that kept everyone safe. Which one makes you look more powerful?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed the situation. Finally, he looked at his men and jerked his head toward Jessica. "Untie her." Relief flooded through Emily so powerfully that her knees almost buckled. Marco's hand found hers squeezing tightly. One of Dominic's men cut the ropes binding Jessica to the chair. She immediately stumbled toward Emily, sobbing, and Emily caught her in a fierce hug. "It's okay," she whispered to her cousin. "You're okay now." "This doesn't mean I trust you, Bellini," Dominic said as Jessica clung to Emily. "But it means I'm willing to have a conversation. Tomorrow, neutral location, we discuss terms." "Agreed." Marco's voice was measured, giving nothing away. "And Dominic, the women are off limits from this point forward. All of them. Emily, her daughter, Jessica, my grandmother, anyone connected to me personally. That's not negotiable." "I'm not in the habit of targeting civilians." "You are now, which is why I need your word that it stops here." Dominic studied Marco for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You have it. This was about making a point, not starting a war." "Then the point is made. We'll talk tomorrow." Vincent appeared at Emily's side, gently separating Jessica from her grip. "Ladies, we should go. Now." Emily let him guide them toward the exit, Marco following close behind. She expected to feel relief, victory even, at having survived the confrontation. Instead, she felt exhausted and shaky, the adrenaline that had carried her through the past hour draining away all at once. They were almost to the car when Jessica grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? Emily, you could have gotten yourself killed in there." "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking he was looking for an excuse to back down without losing face, and I gave him one." "By lecturing a crime boss about morality? That's not de-escalation, that's suicide." "It worked, didn't it?" Jessica stared at her like she was a stranger. "Who are you? The Emily I know would never do something that reckless." "Maybe I'm not that Emily anymore." Emily looked back at the warehouse, where Dominic was still standing in the pool of light. Maybe I'm tired of being scared all the time, tired of letting other people determine what I'm capable of. Marco caught up to them, his expression unreadable. Get Jessica home safe, he told Vincent. Emily comes with me. Emily expected to be driven back to the penthouse, but instead Marco directed the driver to take them to the lakefront. They ended up at a small park overlooking the water, the city lights reflected in the dark surface like fallen stars. You promised you'd stay quiet, Marco said once they were alone, leaning against the car. His voice was carefully controlled, but Emily could hear the emotion underneath. You promised you'd let me handle it. I know, I'm sorry. Sorry. Emily, you walked right up to a man holding your cousin hostage and gave him a lecture about power dynamics. You could have... He stopped, running both hands through his hair. Do you have any idea how terrified I was? Probably about as terrified as I was. Then why did you do it? Emily moved to stand in front of him, close enough to see the fear still lingering in his eyes. Because someone needed to break the pattern. You and Dominic, you were both locked into these positions where neither of you could back down without looking weak. I gave you both an out. By risking yourself. By doing what I do every day at work. De-escalating a situation that was about to get someone hurt. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. I know you wanted to protect me, Marco. But sometimes protection means trusting the people you care about to handle things their own way. Marco caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. I've lost everyone I ever loved. My parents, people I trusted, pieces of myself I'll never get back. I can't... His voice broke slightly. I can't lose you too. Not when I just found you. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. Not after tonight. Not after seeing what my world involves. Maybe not. But I can promise that I'm not running, that whatever this is between us, I'm choosing it. Danger and all. Marco pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly that Emily could barely breathe. She felt him trembling slightly, felt the careful control he usually maintained cracking around the edges. I love you, he said into her hair. I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated, but Emily, I love you, and that terrifies me more than anything Dominic could ever do. Emily's heart felt too big for her chest. I love you too. Even though you make terrible lumpy pancakes and your world is absolutely insane, and I should probably have my head examined for getting involved with you. He laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. My pancakes are not lumpy, they're rustic. They're lumpy. Charmingly lumpy. They stood there by the lake, holding each other as the city moved around them, and Emily felt something settle into place. This wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't safe or simple or anything resembling normal. But it was real. And it was hers. And she was choosing it. We should get back, Marco said finally. Lily will be wondering where you are. Margaret's probably spoiled her rotten by now. Undoubtedly. My grandmother believes sugar before bedtime is an essential part of childhood. They drove back to the penthouse in comfortable silence, Marco's hand wrapped around Emily's. When they arrived, they found Margaret and Lily asleep on the couch together, surrounded by art supplies and what looked like the remains of an ice cream sundae party. She's going to have nightmares about cavities, Emily said, but she was smiling. Small price for happiness. Marco gently lifted Lily without waking her, carrying her to the guest room while Emily followed. He laid her down carefully, tucking the blankets around her with surprising gentleness for someone who claimed to know nothing about children. You're good at that, Emily observed. I had practice. Used to put my little cousins to bed when I was a teenager. He smoothed Lily's hair back from her forehead. She's remarkable, Emily. Smart and brave and full of light. You've done an incredible job raising her. I had a lot of help and a lot of mistakes along the way. That's called being human. Marco straightened, looking at Emily in the dim light from the hallway. Can I ask you something? Anything. When this is all settled, when Dominic and I have worked out our agreement and things are safe again, will you consider making this permanent? Not the hiding in my penthouse part, but the being together part? Emily's breath caught. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you can see a future where this works, where you and Lily are part of my life, and I'm part of yours, where we figure out how to blend your world and mine into something that belongs to all of us. That's a complicated question. I know, which is why I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just asking you to think about it. He moved closer, cupping her face with both hands. I know I'm not the safe choice. I know there are probably a dozen men who could offer you a simpler life without the danger and complications I bring, but Emily, I swear I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you and Lily, trying to build something real that justifies taking this risk. Emily rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and slow. I don't want simple. I want real. And this, with you, is the most real thing I've felt in years. They stood there in the doorway of the guest room, Lily sleeping peacefully beside them, and Emily let herself imagine it. A future where Marco made his lumpy pancakes every Sunday, where Lily called him something other than Marco, maybe something that meant family, where Emily didn't have to choose between her quiet, careful life and this wild, complicated love. I'll think about it, she promised. But Marco, I'm pretty sure I already know my answer. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her again, and Emily tasted promise in it, and hope, and the beginning of something that might actually last. The next morning, Emily woke to voices in the kitchen. She found Marco and Lily making breakfast together, Lily standing on a step stool at the counter while Marco guided her hands through mixing batter. You have to fold it gently, Marco was explaining. See? Like this. That's what keeps the pancakes fluffy. But yours are always lumpy, Lily pointed out. That's because I add extra love, which makes them lumpy but delicious. Mama says they're just lumpy. Your mama has no appreciation for culinary artistry. Emily leaned against the doorframe, watching them, and felt her heart swell with an emotion so powerful it almost hurt. This is what she wanted, she realized. Not just Marco, but this, the easy domesticity, the laughter, the sense of building something together. Morning, she said, announcing her presence. Lily's face lit up. Mama, Marco is teaching me to make pancakes, the right way, not your way. Excuse me, my pancakes are perfect. They're round, Marco said diplomatically, which is fine, but mine have character. Your character has lumps. They ate breakfast together, the three of them, and it felt like family in a way that made Emily's chest tight with hope. After Lily was settled with cartoons and coloring books, Marco pulled Emily aside. I have to meet with Dominic this afternoon, work out the details of our agreement. Will it be dangerous? No more than usual. He'll want to save face, make sure he gets something out of backing down. But Vincent will be with me, and we'll meet somewhere public enough that neither of us can try anything stupid. Be careful anyway. Always am. He kissed her forehead. Margaret will stay here with you and Lily. Tomorrow, assuming everything goes well, you should be able to go back to your apartment, back to normal life. Normal feels like a strange concept at this point. Fair enough. Back to your life then. Work, preschool, all the regular rhythms. Emily nodded, but she felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Going back meant leaving this bubble where she and Marco existed together, where Lily got to experience this version of family. Going back meant separate lives that only intersected when they made time, that had to be carefully balanced instead of naturally integrated. What are you thinking? Marco asked. I'm thinking that I don't want to go back, not to being apart anyway. Then don't. Emily, I meant what I said last night. I want you here, both of you, not hiding from danger, but choosing to build something together. That's a big step. I know. Which is why I'm not pushing, just putting the offer out there for when you're ready. He left for his meeting with Dominic around noon, and Emily spent the afternoon with Lily and Margaret trying not to check her phone every 5 minutes. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness, each minute another opportunity for something to go wrong. When Marco finally returned just after 5, Emily practically threw herself at him. It's done, he said, holding her close. Dominic and I have an agreement. He gets some territory he's been wanting on the south side. I get assurances that you and your family are permanently off limits. Everyone walks away with something. And Jessica? Safe. I had Vincent check on her this morning. She's shaken but unharmed, and I've arranged for some additional security at her apartment for the next few weeks just in case. Emily sagged against him with relief. It's really over? The immediate danger, yes. There will always be complications in my world, always new challenges. But you're protected now, Emily. Everyone knows you're mine, and that means something. Yours, she repeated. I like the sound of that. Good. Because I'm yours too, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything. That night, after Lily was asleep, Emily and Marco sat on his balcony overlooking the city, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. I've been thinking about your question, Emily said, about making this permanent. And I think we should do it. Not right away. Lily needs time to adjust, and I need to figure out logistics with work and her school. But Marco, I want this. Want us. Want to build a life where we don't have to choose between my world and yours because we've created something new that belongs to both of us. Marco was quiet for a long moment. You're sure? Because Emily, once you commit to this, to me, there's no going back to simple. My life will always have complications. I'm sure. Terrified but sure. She laced her fingers through his. Besides, simple is overrated. I tried simple with Ryan, and it was a disaster. I'd rather have complicated and real than simple and empty. Then let's do it. Let's build something remarkable together. They kissed as the city lights sparkled below them, and Emily felt like she was standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying and absolutely worth the risk. The next week passed in a blur of transitions. Emily returned to work, explaining her absence as a family emergency that was now resolved. Lily went back to preschool with upgraded security protocols that the director didn't question too closely. Life resumed its normal rhythms, but with Marco woven through it now in ways that felt increasingly permanent. He showed up at the hospital with coffee during Emily's breaks. He picked up Lily from preschool twice that week, charming her teachers and making her daughter giggle with terrible jokes. He cooked dinner at Emily's tiny apartment, somehow making gourmet meals in her limited kitchen while Lily did homework at the table. And slowly, carefully, they started building something that felt like family. 3 weeks after the warehouse confrontation, Jessica finally agreed to have coffee with Emily. They met at a cafe in Lincoln Park, and Emily braced herself for anger or recriminations. Instead, Jessica hugged her tightly. I owe you an apology. For what? For judging you. For all those years of listening to our family gossip about your choices and never defending you. For not realizing that you were building something real while the rest of us were just playing at success. Jessica pulled back, her eyes sincere. Emily, what you did in that warehouse, standing up to that man, knowing you could get hurt, but doing it anyway to save me, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. I was terrified the entire time. That's what makes it brave. And Marco, Emily, the way he looks at you, the way he was willing to risk everything to keep you safe, that's real love, the kind most people spend their whole lives searching for. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know. So when's the wedding? Jessica! What? You're clearly headed that direction. Might as well start planning. They laughed together, and Emily felt something heal between them, a connection strengthened by shared danger rather than broken by it. That evening, Marco made his terrible lumpy pancakes for dinner at Emily's apartment, and Lily insisted on helping. Emily watched them work together, flour everywhere, laughter filling her small kitchen, and felt a contentment she'd thought was impossible. Marco? Lily asked as she carefully poured batter onto the griddle. Are you going to be my new daddy? The kitchen went silent. Emily's heart stopped. Marco looked at her over Lily's head, his expression carefully neutral, waiting for Emily to take the lead. Emily crouched down beside her daughter. Would you like Marco to be part of our family, sweetie? Yes, he makes good pancakes, and he knows all the best markers, and he makes you smile the way you used to smile before Daddy left. Lily looked up at Marco with complete trust. I think you should stay forever. Marco's eyes were suspiciously bright. I think that sounds perfect, kid, if your mom agrees. Emily stood up, moved into Marco's arms, and kissed him while Lily made exaggerated gagging noises. I agree, Emily whispered. Forever sounds exactly right. The weeks that followed Lily's innocent question about Marco becoming her new daddy transformed from careful courtship into something deeper, something that felt inevitable in the best possible way. Emily found herself spending more nights at Marco's penthouse than her own apartment, Lily's artwork gradually covering his pristine refrigerator like colorful declarations of belonging. The guest room became Lily's room without anyone making a formal decision about it. Stuffed animals migrating from their small apartment until Marco's elegant space looked lived in and loved. Emily's family noticed the change immediately. Her mother called 3 times in 1 week, her voice tight with questions she was too polite to ask directly. Melissa texted asking if Emily was really dating the man from the wedding, the one who'd made such an impression. Even her father, who rarely involved himself in his daughter's personal lives, sent a brief email asking if everything was all right. Emily ignored most of it, too happy to let their judgment touch her. But she knew eventually she'd have to face them, have to explain that she'd fallen in love with a man whose world existed in shades of gray they'd never understand. The confrontation came sooner than she expected. It was a Saturday morning in early November, the kind of crisp autumn day that made Chicago beautiful. Emily was at her apartment collecting more clothes for Lily when her mother appeared at the door, unannounced and determined. "We need to talk," Carol Carter said, sweeping past Emily into the small living room without waiting for an invitation. "Mom, I'm kind of in the middle of something. This won't take long. Emily, sit down, please." Emily reluctantly sat on the edge of her worn couch, watching her mother pace in the limited space. Carol looked elegant even in casual clothes, her disapproval practically radiating from her carefully maintained composure. "I've been hearing things," Carol began, "about this man you're seeing, Marco Bellini." "What kind of things?" "That he's involved in businesses that aren't entirely legitimate, that he has connections to organized crime, that he's dangerous." Carol stopped pacing, fixing Emily with a sharp look. "Please tell me these are just rumors." Emily thought about lying, about protecting her mother from truths she wouldn't want to hear. But she was done hiding, done pretending to be someone she wasn't to make other people comfortable. "They're not rumors. Marco does run businesses that exist in gray areas. He has connections to people and situations that most people never encounter. And yes, there's an element of danger to his world." Oh, Carol's face went pale. "And you're exposing your daughter to this? Emily, have you lost your mind?" "I'm giving my daughter a chance to be part of a real family, to have someone who loves her unconditionally, who shows up for her, who makes her laugh and feel safe, something her biological father never provided. By involving her with criminals? By choosing a man who's complicated but genuine over the superficial perfection you've always valued." Emily stood, meeting her mother's gaze directly. "Marco isn't perfect. His life isn't simple, but he's honest about who he is, and he loves us. Really loves us. Not the version of us that would look good at country club events, but the messy, real people we actually are." "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Carol said, her voice breaking slightly. "When you got pregnant with Ryan's baby, I thought maybe you'd learn from that mistake. Instead, you're making an even worse choice." The words stung, but Emily refused to let them land the way her mother intended. "Lily isn't a mistake, and neither is Marco. I'm sorry if my choices don't match your expectations, but Mom, I'm happier now than I've been in years. Doesn't that matter to you at all?" "Happiness isn't everything, Emily. Stability matters. Safety matters. What happens when this man's dangerous world catches up with you? What happens to Lily?" "Marco protects us. Better than Ryan ever did. Better than our family did when I was struggling as a new mother, and you were all too embarrassed by my situation to offer real help." Carol flinched like she'd been slapped. "That's not fair, isn't it?" "Mom, when did you last ask about my life without immediately comparing it to Melissa's success? When did you last look at me and see someone you were proud of instead of someone who disappointed you?" Silence fell between them, years of unspoken resentment suddenly visible in the space of Emily's tiny living room. Carol's eyes were bright with unshed tears, her usual composure cracking. "I just want you to be safe," she said finally, her voice small. "I want you to have the life you were supposed to have before everything got so complicated. I have the life I'm supposed to have. It's just not the one you planned for me." Emily softened slightly, seeing her mother's genuine fear underneath the judgment. "I know this is hard for you to understand. I know Marco isn't what you wanted for me. But he's what I need, what Lily needs. And I'm asking you to trust that I know what I'm doing." "And if I can't?" Emily felt her heart break a little. "Then I guess we'll have to figure out how to have a relationship despite our differences. Because I'm not giving him up, and I'm not apologizing for choosing love over appearances." Carol gathered her purse, her movements stiff with hurt and anger. At the door, she paused. "I hope you're right about him, Emily, for your sake and Lily's. Because if you're wrong, I don't know if I can watch you pick up the pieces again. After her mother left, Emily sat alone in her apartment for a long time, letting herself feel the grief of that conversation. She'd stood up for herself, for her choices, for the life she was building, but it had cost her something too. The hope that her family might eventually understand, might eventually accept her for who she actually was. Her phone rang. Marco. Hey, she answered, trying to keep the tears out of her voice. What's wrong? How do you always know? Because I pay attention. What happened? She told him about her mother's visit, about the accusations and ultimatums, about the look on Carol's face when Emily had chosen Marco over her family's approval. I can step back, Marco said quietly when she finished, if it would make things easier with your family. No, absolutely not, Emily's voice was fierce. I meant what I told my mother. I'm choosing this, choosing us, whatever the cost. That's a high price to pay. You're worth it. She heard him exhale, could picture him in his office or his living room, processing what she'd said. Come home, he said finally. You and Lily, let me make you terrible pancakes and we'll figure out the rest together. Home, Emily repeated, and realized that's exactly what his penthouse had become. Not her place or his place, but theirs. We'll be there in 20 minutes. The situation with her family didn't improve, but it didn't completely fracture either. Carol maintained a polite distance, attending required events but making her disapproval clear through pursed lips and careful silences. Melissa tried to play mediator, inviting Emily to lunches where she'd gently suggest that maybe Marco wasn't the right choice. Maybe Emily should think about what this relationship was teaching Lily about appropriate partners. Emily stopped attending those lunches after the third one, tired of defending her choices to people who'd already made up their minds. But while her biological family pulled away, another family formed around her. Margaret became a constant presence in their lives, arriving at the penthouse with craft supplies and stories, and the kind of unconditional love Emily hadn't experienced since she was young. Vincent, who Emily had initially feared, turned out to have a dry sense of humor and genuine affection for Lily, teaching her card tricks and patiently answering her endless questions about everything. And Marco continued to show up in ways that mattered. He attended Lily's preschool Halloween parade dressed in a costume she'd designed, a combination of superhero and chef that made no sense but delighted her completely. He learned the names of all her stuffed animals and their complex backstories. He held Emily through her night shifts at the hospital, having food delivered so she'd have something warm waiting when she got home exhausted. He was building a life with them, piece by careful piece, and Emily fell more in love with him every day. 3 weeks after her confrontation with her mother, Marco came home from a business meeting looking troubled. Emily had learned to read his expressions, could distinguish between the general stress of running multiple enterprises and something more specific. What happened? She asked as he shrugged off his jacket. Dominic wants another meeting, says there's something we need to discuss. Emily's stomach clenched with familiar fear. Is he threatening us again? No, nothing like that. He was actually polite, which is somehow more concerning. Marco pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. It's probably just business, but I wanted you to know. Do you want me to come with you? Absolutely not. You're staying here where it's safe, with Vincent and Margaret and Lily. Marco, please, Emily, let me handle this one alone. I promise if it's anything you need to worry about, I'll tell you everything. She agreed reluctantly, and the next evening Marco left for his meeting while Emily tried to distract herself with Lily's bedtime routine. Stories were read, teeth were brushed, prayers were said, a new addition to their routine that Lily had insisted on after a friend at school mentioned it, asking for blessings on her family that now included Marco and Margaret and even Vincent. Emily was cleaning up the kitchen when Marco returned, and his expression made her heart stop. What is it? What did he say? Marco set a folder on the kitchen counter, his movements careful. Dominic came to me with information about your ex-husband. Ryan? What about him? He's been making inquiries, asking questions about my business, about our relationship, about whether there are vulnerabilities he could exploit for leverage in your custody arrangement. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. He's going after Lily? He's considering it. Dominic has sources in legal circles. Heard that Ryan's been consulting with a particularly aggressive family law attorney about filing for increased custody based on your association with me. He plans to argue that you're exposing Lily to dangerous influences. The kitchen tilted sideways. Emily gripped the counter for support. He can't do that. He barely sees her as it is. He has no grounds. He has the fact that you're in a relationship with someone whose business dealings aren't entirely legitimate. A good attorney could make that look very damaging to a judge. Marco's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. Dominic thought I should know before Ryan made any official moves. Why would Dominic help us? Because apparently my willingness to negotiate instead of escalate at the warehouse impressed him. He said most people in my position would have retaliated after he took Jessica, but I chose a peaceful solution. He respects that, and he doesn't respect men who use children as weapons. Marco opened the folder, showing Emily documents that made her head spin. He also provided copies of communications between Ryan and his attorney, including their strategy for the custody challenge. Emily read through the documents with growing horror. Ryan wasn't just considering increased custody. He wanted full custody, wanted to paint Emily as an unfit mother who'd chosen a criminal over her daughter's well-being. This is insane. He doesn't even want Lily. He just wants to punish me for moving on. I know, which is why we're going to stop him before he can file anything. Marco's expression was grim but determined. I've already contacted the best family law attorney in Chicago. She's reviewing your custody agreement and Ryan's visitation history, building a case that shows his complete lack of involvement in Lily's life. Will it be enough? It will when combined with documentation of everything I've done to ensure Lily's safety. The security measures at her preschool, the background checks on everyone who works for me that has contact with her, the legitimate businesses that provide substantial income. Emily, I know my world has complications, but I've been very careful to keep the dangerous parts completely separate from you and Lily. Emily sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the thought of fighting Ryan in court, of having to defend her choices to a judge who might see Marco exactly the way her mother did, as a threat instead of a blessing. Hey, Marco crouched in front of her, taking her hands. Look at me. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. Ryan has abandoned his daughter for months at a time, has missed child support payments, has shown zero consistent interest in her well-being. No judge is going to give him custody based on his sudden concern about your boyfriend. You don't know that. I know that I have resources he can't match, and I'm willing to use every single one of them to protect our family. Legal resources, financial resources, whatever it takes. I don't want Lily to become a pawn in some war between you and Ryan. She won't be. This isn't about Ryan and me. This is about protecting a little girl who deserves to stay with the mother who's given her everything. Marco's voice gentled. Emily, I've already started transitioning some of my business operations to be completely above board, opening legitimate consulting firms, investing in legal ventures, creating a paper trail that shows I'm a responsible businessman who happens to also care deeply about you and your daughter. Emily looked up at him through tears. You're changing your business for us? I'm changing everything for us. My grandmother has been telling me for years that I needed to find a reason to step back from the dangerous parts of my life. You and Lily are that reason. She pulled him into a fierce kiss, tasting salt from her own tears. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his. What do we do now? Now we prepare. We document everything. Lily's happiness, her stability, her thriving in this environment. We get statements from her preschool teachers, from Margaret, from everyone who's seen how well she's doing. And we make it crystal clear to Ryan that challenging us will be the biggest mistake he's ever made. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Emily met with the attorney Marco had hired, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who had a reputation for destroying unprepared opponents in family court. Patricia interviewed everyone in Lily's life, building a comprehensive picture of a child who was loved, protected, and flourishing. She also dug into Ryan's background, uncovering missed visitation dates, bounced child support checks, and a pattern of broken promises that painted him as an absent father, suddenly interested in his daughter only when it served his own interests. He doesn't have a case, Patricia told Emily and Marco during one strategy session. Not a real one. But he might try anyway, hoping you'll settle to avoid the publicity. We're not settling, Marco said firmly. Good, because I'd love to destroy him in court. But despite Patricia's confidence, Emily couldn't shake her anxiety. She found herself watching Lily more closely, documenting every happy moment like she was building evidence of her own competence. Look, see how well my daughter is doing? See how she laughs and creates and trusts and loves? I did that. We did that. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the first week of December, and Emily felt the date approaching like a storm cloud. Ryan filed his petition claiming that Emily's relationship with Marco Bellini exposed their daughter to criminal elements and endangered her physical and emotional well-being. The accusations were brutal, painting Marco as a mobster and Emily as a woman so desperate for male attention that she'd sacrifice her daughter's safety. Reading the filing made Emily physically ill. The night before the hearing, she couldn't sleep. She paced the penthouse while Marco and Lily slept, watching the city lights and trying to quiet the catastrophic thoughts spinning through her mind. What if the judge sided with Ryan? What if they took Lily away? What if every choice she'd made led to losing the one person who mattered most? She was standing at the windows, arms wrapped around herself, when Marco appeared beside her. "Can't sleep?" he asked quietly. "Can't stop thinking about tomorrow, about all the ways this could go wrong." Marco pulled her into his arms, surrounding her with warmth and stability. "I know you're scared. I am too. But Emily, we have truth on our side. We have evidence that Lily is thriving, that you're an incredible mother, that our relationship has brought nothing but positive changes to her life. What if that's not enough? Then we appeal. We fight harder. We use every legal avenue available until we win." His grip tightened. "But it won't come to that. Ryan has no case, and tomorrow Patricia is going to make that abundantly clear." Emily wanted to believe him, but fear had its claws too deep. The hearing took place in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and recycled air. Emily sat beside Patricia at the plaintiff's table, Marco directly behind her in the gallery. Across the aisle, Ryan sat with his expensive attorney, looking confident and smug. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed the filed documents with a stern expression before calling the hearing to order. Ryan's attorney went first, painting a picture of Emily as a woman who'd made reckless choices, who'd exposed her vulnerable daughter to dangerous criminal elements in pursuit of romance and financial stability. He submitted Marco's business connections as evidence, pointing to vague associations with people who'd been investigated for various crimes. Emily's hands clenched in her lap as she listened to her relationship being twisted into something sordid and calculated. Then Patricia stood, and her rebuttal was surgical. She presented documentation of Ryan's absentee parenting, the missed visits, the unpaid support, the birthdays and holidays where he'd promised to show up and then didn't. She submitted statements from Lily's preschool teachers describing a child who'd become noticeably happier and more confident in recent months. She called Margaret Bellini to the stand, and Marco's grandmother testified about the loving family environment, about watching Lily flourish under Emily's care and Marco's gentle involvement. "And Mr. Cole," Patricia said, turning to Ryan with devastating precision, "when was the last time you attended a parent-teacher conference for your daughter?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "I've been busy with work." "That's not what I asked. When did you last attend a conference or a school event, or spend more than a few hours with Lily?" "My work schedule makes it difficult. Your work schedule has allowed you to take 3 vacations in the past year, according to your social media posts. But somehow you couldn't make time for your daughter's Halloween parade, or her preschool graduation, or the recital where she specifically asked for you to be there." Ryan's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The judge looked at Ryan with barely concealed disgust. Patricia then called Emily to the stand, and Emily answered questions about her nursing career, about Lily's daily routine, about the security measures Marco had implemented to ensure their safety. She spoke honestly about Marco's complicated business dealings, but emphasized how he'd worked to separate the dangerous elements from their family life. "Do you love Marco Bellini?" Patricia asked. "Yes, absolutely." "And does he love you and your daughter?" "Yes. He shows it every day, in ways both big and small. He makes Lily laugh, he helps with her homework, he cooks us terrible lumpy pancakes on Sunday mornings. He's present and engaged and kind, which is more than her biological father has ever been." Ryan's attorney tried to discredit her testimony, tried to make Marco sound like a threat, but Emily stood firm, refusing to let her relationship be reduced to legal strategy and worst-case scenarios. Finally, the judge called a recess to review all the evidence. Emily sat in the hallway with Marco and Patricia, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "You did great," Patricia said. "The judge knows this is a frivolous filing, but she has to review everything carefully." "How long will that take?" "Could be an hour, could be all day." It was 3 hours. 3 hours of Emily pacing and Marco trying to distract her and Patricia making confident predictions that didn't quite penetrate Emily's anxiety. When they were finally called back, the judge looked stern and exhausted. "I've reviewed all the submitted evidence," she began, "and I have to say, Mr. Cole, that this petition is one of the more transparent attempts at manipulation I've seen in my years on the bench." Ryan's face went red. "Your daughter is thriving in her current environment. Her mother has provided stability, love, and appropriate care. The relationship with Mr. Bellini, while perhaps unconventional, shows no signs of endangering the child's well-being. In fact, the evidence suggests quite the opposite." Emily felt Marco's hand find hers, squeezing tight. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "your own record as a parent is abysmal. Missed visitations, inconsistent support, minimal involvement. This petition reeks of vindictiveness rather than genuine concern for your daughter's welfare." "Your Honor," Ryan's attorney tried to interject, but the judge silenced him with a look. "I'm denying this petition in its entirety. The current custody arrangement will remain in place, with one modification. Mr. Cole, your visitation will be reduced to supervised visits twice monthly until such time as you can demonstrate consistent, appropriate engagement with your daughter. This court does not look kindly on parents who weaponize children in personal disputes." The gavel came down with a sound of finality, and Emily felt her knees buckle with relief. Marco caught her, holding her up, while Patricia smiled in triumph. Ryan stormed from the courtroom, his attorney scrambling to follow. Emily didn't care. She'd won. Lily was safe. Their family was protected. Outside the courthouse, Marco pulled her into his arms, while Patricia handled the remaining paperwork. "It's over," he said into her hair. "He can't touch you. Can't touch Lily." "I can't believe it. I was so sure." "I know, but Emily, we won because we had truth on our side. Because you're an amazing mother and Lily is clearly loved." The judge saw that. Emily pulled back to look at him, this man who'd turned her life upside down in the best possible way. "Thank you for everything. The attorney, the support, the willingness to change your whole life for us. You're worth changing for." They drove home to the penthouse, where Margaret was waiting with Lily. Emily swept her daughter into her arms, holding her so tight that Lily protested. "Mama, you're squishing me again." "Sorry, baby, I just love you so much." "I love you too." "Did you win the thing?" Emily looked at Marco over Lily's head, saw him smiling. "Yes, sweetie, we won." "Good. Can we have pancakes to celebrate?" "Absolutely," Marco said. "The lumpiest pancakes you've ever seen." That night, after Lily was asleep and Margaret had gone home, Emily and Marco sat together on the balcony wrapped in blankets against the December cold. "I've been thinking," Marco said, "about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've been building this life together, you and me and Lily, but we've been doing it without making it official, without putting a name to what we are." Emily's heart started racing. "Marco, wait, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He shifted to face her fully. 3 weeks from now is the anniversary of your sister's wedding. The night we met, the night everything changed. I've been thinking we should mark that anniversary somehow." "How?" "With a family dinner. At my restaurant, the one downtown that I actually own legitimately. I want to invite your whole family, your parents, Melissa and her husband, Jessica, everyone. I want to show them who we are together, give them a chance to see what they've been missing." "Marco, my mother won't come. You know she won't." "Maybe not, but I want to give her the opportunity. Give all of them the opportunity to see that we're serious, that we're committed, that we're building something real." Emily thought about her family's judgment, about the months of careful distance and disapproving silences. "I don't know if I can handle another rejection." "Then we'll handle it together. But Emily, I refuse to hide our relationship like it's something shameful. I love you. I love Lily. And I want everyone to know it, including your family." She looked at him in the soft light from the apartment, this complicated man who'd somehow become the center of her world. "Okay, Let's do it. Let's invite them and see what happens. The invitations went out the next day, formal cards delivered by courier. Emily's mother called immediately. "What is this?" Carol demanded. "It's exactly what it looks like, a family dinner to celebrate Marco and me." "Emily, I don't think—" "You don't have to come, Mom, but I'm inviting you anyway because you're my family and I want you there. What you do with that invitation is your choice." The line was quiet for a long moment. "I'll think about it." It wasn't yes, but it wasn't a definite no either. Emily counted that as progress. Melissa confirmed immediately, curiosity clearly outweighing disapproval. Jessica RSVP'd with enthusiasm, saying she owed Marco a proper thank you for handling the Dominic situation. Emily's father sent a brief email saying he'd attend if Carol did, which was about as much involvement as he ever showed in family matters. The days leading up to the dinner were tense with anticipation. Marco arranged everything personally: the menu, the wine, the private dining room decorated with subtle elegance. He wanted it perfect, wanted Emily's family to see him as more than the criminal they'd imagined. The morning of the dinner, Emily's mother called. "I'll be there tonight," Carol said without preamble. "Your father and I both will. But Emily, I need you to understand that this doesn't mean I approve. I'm not asking for approval, Mom. I'm asking for a chance, for you to see what Marco and I have built together, to meet the man who loves your daughter and granddaughter. That's all." "Then that's what I'll do. See you tonight." Emily hung up shaking, hardly believing her mother had agreed. Marco found her staring at her phone in disbelief. "She said yes?" "She said yes." "Then we'd better make sure everything is perfect." That evening, Emily dressed in a new dress Marco had bought her, deep emerald green that made her eyes bright and her confidence stronger. Lily wore a velvet dress with a matching headband, looking like a tiny princess. Marco was devastating in a dark suit, and together they looked like an actual family rather than an arrangement that had started with a single dance. They arrived at the restaurant early, Marco checking every detail while Emily tried to calm her nerves. The private dining room was beautiful, intimate but not too small, elegant without being ostentatious. Everything Marco had promised and more. Her family arrived precisely on time. Carol and her father looking uncomfortable but present, Melissa and her husband curious, Jessica warm and friendly. They gathered in the private room, and for a moment the silence was awkward enough to make Emily want to flee. Then Lily ran to her grandmother, showing off her dress and chattering about how Marco had let her help pick out the flowers for the tables. Carol softened visibly, crouching to her granddaughter's level and genuinely engaging with her stories. Marco moved through the room with practiced grace, greeting everyone with warmth and respect. He thanked them for coming, acknowledging the difficulty some of them might have had with the invitation, but expressing his genuine hope that tonight could be a new beginning. Dinner was extraordinary. Course after course of beautifully prepared food, each dish a work of art. Marco had clearly pulled out all the stops, wanting to show Emily's family exactly what he was capable of when he put his mind to something. Between courses, he stood and gently tapped his wine glass for attention. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady, but Emily could see the nervousness in his eyes. 3 weeks from now marks an important anniversary for me. It's the night I met Emily at her sister's wedding, the night my life changed completely. Emily's mother shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't interrupt. "I went to that wedding because my grandmother insisted, expecting another boring evening of family obligations. Instead, I found someone extraordinary, someone who was brave enough to accept help from a stranger, kind enough to see past my complications, strong enough to build a life that defied everyone's expectations." Marco's eyes found Emily's across the table, and the love in them was so clear that her breath caught. "Emily has taught me what it means to be part of a real family. She's shown me that strength isn't about control or power. It's about showing up every day for the people you love, about making terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings and helping with homework and being present for all the small moments that make up a life." Lily giggled at the pancake comment, and even Melissa smiled. "I know some of you have had concerns about our relationship, about my background, my business dealings, whether I'm appropriate for Emily and Lily. Those are fair concerns, and I respect them. But I want you to know that I've spent the past 3 months working to become the kind of man they deserve, transitioning my businesses to legitimate operations, creating security measures to keep them safe, building a life that's worthy of their trust." He moved to stand beside Emily's chair, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "But more than that, I want you to know that I love them, completely, unconditionally, without reservation. Emily is the strongest person I've ever met, and Lily is a joy that brightens every day. They've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, a family, a home, a reason to be better than I was. Marco reached into his jacket pocket, and Emily's heart stopped as he pulled out a small velvet box. He lowered himself to one knee beside her chair, and the room went utterly silent. Emily Carter, you came into my life when I least expected it and changed everything. You made me believe that I could be more than my circumstances, that I could build something real and lasting and good. You and Lily have become my whole world, and I can't imagine a future that doesn't have both of you in it. He opened the box, revealing a ring that took Emily's breath away. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique and perfect. Will you marry me? Will you let me be part of your family officially, not just as the man who makes lumpy pancakes, but as your husband and Lily's father? Will you trust me with your heart and your future and all the messy, complicated, beautiful parts of building a life together? Emily was crying, tears streaming down her face as she looked at this man who'd transformed from a stranger at a wedding to the center of her entire world. She was aware of her family watching, of Lily bouncing in her seat with excitement, of Margaret smiling knowingly from across the table. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes. Absolutely yes. Marco slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because of course he'd found a way to know her size, and pulled her into a kiss that made Lily make her usual exaggerated gagging sounds while the rest of the table erupted in surprised applause. When they broke apart, Emily saw tears in her mother's eyes. Carol stood and crossed to their side of the table, and for a moment Emily braced for criticism or disapproval. Instead, her mother pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm sorry," Carol whispered. "I'm sorry for not seeing what you were building, for judging instead of supporting, for letting my expectations blind me to your happiness." "Mom, let me finish. You were right, Emily, about everything. I've been so focused on what I thought your life should be that I couldn't see the beautiful life you were actually creating. And watching Marco just now, seeing how he looks at you, how Lily clearly adores him, I was wrong about all of it." Emily hugged her mother back, feeling years of tension dissolve. "Thank you. That means everything." The rest of the dinner was joyful and warm, everyone toasting the engagement and asking about wedding plans that didn't exist yet. Melissa pulled Emily aside at one point. "I owe you an apology too," she said, "for all those lunches where I tried to convince you to leave him. I didn't understand what you had. It's okay. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's more than okay. It's amazing. Em, you look happier than I've ever seen you. That's what matters." Even Emily's father, usually silent and distant, shook Marco's hand with genuine warmth and told him he'd better take care of his daughter and granddaughter. "I will," Marco promised, "with everything I have." Later, after her family had left with promises to help plan the wedding, Emily found herself alone with Marco in the empty dining room. Lily had fallen asleep in a chair, exhausted from excitement. Marco lifted her gently, and they walked out to the car together. "That went better than expected," Emily said. "Your mother cried. I wasn't sure if that was good or bad." "Definitely good. She never cries unless she's genuinely moved." Emily looked down at the ring on her finger, still hardly believing this was real. "Marco, are you sure about this? About all of it? Marriage and instant fatherhood and joining my complicated family?" "More sure than I've been about anything in my life." He settled Lily in her car seat, then turned to Emily. "I told you at that first dinner that I didn't think I was suited for relationships, that my life was too complicated for genuine connection. I remember. I was wrong. Or maybe I just needed to find the right person, someone strong enough to handle the complications, brave enough to choose love despite the risks, real enough to call me on my bullshit when I'm being impossible." Emily laughed, pulling him close. "I can definitely do all those things. I know. It's one of the many reasons I love you." They drove home through Chicago at night, the city lights reflecting off fresh snow that had started falling during dinner. At the penthouse, they carried Lily to bed together, tucking her in with her favorite rabbit and the art supplies that were never far from reach. "She's going to be impossible when she finds out you proposed," Emily whispered as they watched Lily sleep. "Worth it. Besides, I already asked her permission yesterday." Emily's head whipped around. "You did?" "Of course. She's part of this decision too. I took her for ice cream and explained that I wanted to marry her mom, wanted to officially be her family, asked if that was okay with her. What did she say? She asked if she'd get to be a flower girl and wear a fancy dress. When I said yes, she informed me that was acceptable and I had her blessing. Marco smiled at the memory. Then she made me promise we'd still have pancake Sundays after the wedding. And you promised? Absolutely. Some traditions are non-negotiable. They moved to their bedroom, their shared space now, not his or hers, but theirs. Emily changed into pajamas while Marco did the same, and they climbed into bed with the easy familiarity of people who'd already learned each other's rhythms. When do you want to get married? Marco asked, pulling her close. I don't know. Soon? I don't need a huge wedding or months of planning. I just want to be your wife. How about New Year's Eve? Start the new year as a married couple? Emily propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. That's less than a month away. I know. Too fast? No. Perfect, actually. Simple ceremony, just family and close friends, then the rest of our lives together. I like the sound of that. They planned the wedding over the next 3 weeks, keeping it intimate and meaningful rather than elaborate. The ceremony would be at Marco's restaurant, the same private dining room where he'd proposed. Margaret would officiate. She'd gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Lily would be flower girl, scattering petals with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything. Vincent would stand up as Marco's best man, and Sarah would be Emily's maid of honor. Emily's family threw themselves into helping, her mother particularly determined to make up for months of disapproval by planning the perfect reception. Melissa handled invitations and decorations. Jessica organized the flowers. Even Emily's father contributed, offering to walk her down the aisle with genuine pride rather than obligation. The weeks flew by in a blur of decisions and preparations. Emily continued working at the hospital, but she'd given notice that she'd be reducing her hours after the wedding. Marco had offered to support them financially, but Emily wanted to keep working, keep making a difference in children's lives. They'd compromised. She'd moved to a part-time schedule that gave her more time with Lily and Marco while still maintaining the career she loved. Ryan had gone silent since the custody hearing, apparently accepting that he'd lost his opportunity to use Lily as a weapon. Emily felt grateful for that small mercy, for the ability to move forward without constantly looking over her shoulder. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear, the city blanketed in snow that made everything look magical. Emily got ready in one of the restaurant's back rooms, surrounded by Sarah and Melissa and her mother, all of them laughing and crying and helping her into a simple white dress that made her feel beautiful. You look stunning, Carol said, adjusting Emily's veil with gentle hands. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, for finding this, for choosing happiness, for being brave enough to build the life you deserve. Thanks, Mom. That means everything. I mean it. I was wrong about so many things, but I was most wrong about Marco. He's extraordinary, Emily, the way he loves you and Lily. That's the real thing. That's what matters. The ceremony was small and perfect. Emily walked down a makeshift aisle on her father's arm, while Lily scattered rose petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Marco waited at the front of the room, looking devastated in his tuxedo, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. Margaret read vows they'd written together, promises about partnership and love, and choosing each other every day despite complications and challenges. Marco's hand shook slightly when he slipped the wedding band onto Emily's finger, and his voice broke when he promised to love her and Lily for the rest of his life. When Margaret pronounced them married and invited Marco to kiss his bride, the small gathering erupted in applause. Emily kissed her husband, and felt like everything in her life had finally aligned exactly as it was meant to. The reception was joyful and warm, full of laughter and dancing and toasts that made everyone cry. Lily gave a speech that consisted mostly of thanking Marco for being the best not really daddy, but basically daddy ever, and making everyone promise there would be cake. Emily danced with Marco while Lily spun in circles nearby, her flower girl dress a blur of white and pink. She danced with her father, who told her he was proud of her for the first time she could remember. She danced with Vincent, who proved surprisingly graceful and told her she'd made his boss happier than he'd seen in 20 years. As midnight approached, everyone gathered for the countdown. Emily stood with Marco on one side and Lily on the other, her husband's arm around her waist and her daughter's hand in hers. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Emily thought about the past 3 months, about how a single dance at a wedding had led to this moment. 7, 6, 5. She thought about all the ways her life had transformed, about fear giving way to courage and loneliness becoming belonging. 4, 3, 2. She looked at Marco and saw their whole future reflected in his eyes. The challenges they'd face together, the joy they'd build, the family they'd continue creating. 1. "Happy New Year!" everyone shouted as champagne corks popped and streamers fell. Marco kissed Emily while Lily jumped between them demanding to be included, and they ended up in a three-way hug that was messy and perfect, and exactly what Emily had always wanted without knowing it. Later, after the guests had left and Lily had been put to bed in the apartment they now officially all shared, Emily and Marco stood on their balcony watching fireworks explode over the city. "No regrets?" Marco asked, pulling her close against the cold. "Not a single one. You? Just that I didn't meet you sooner. That we wasted time pretending this could be casual instead of acknowledging it was always going to be everything. We had to get here somehow. All the complicated parts led to this." "True." He kissed the top of her head. "Emily Bellini. I like the sound of that." "Me too, though the nurses at work are going to be confused when I change my nameplate. They'll adjust, just like your family adjusted, just like everyone adjusts when they realize what we have is real." Emily turned in his arms to face him, her husband of approximately 3 hours. "What do we have, Marco? How do you define this?" "A second chance, a real family, a love that started with a dance and became a lifetime." He smiled, and she saw everything she needed in that expression. "Home. We have home." "Yeah," Emily agreed, pulling him down for a kiss as fireworks lit the sky behind them. "We do." 3 months later, they were having their traditional pancake sundae when Lily made an announcement. "I think we should get a dog." Marco looked at Emily over Lily's head, his expression amused. "A dog?" "Yes! A big fluffy one that can sleep in my bed and play in the park with me." "That's a big responsibility, kiddo." "I'm responsible. I remember to brush my teeth almost every night." Emily laughed, reaching across the table to take Marco's hand. "You know what? Let's do it. Let's get a dog." "Really?" both Lily and Marco asked simultaneously. "Really. We have the space, we have the love, and honestly, what's one more piece of beautiful chaos in our life?" So they got a dog. A golden retriever puppy that Lily named Pancake, because of course she did. The puppy destroyed 2 pairs of Marco's expensive shoes and knocked over a priceless vase that he claimed not to care about. Lily adored him instantly, and Marco was caught multiple times sneaking the dog treats despite his own rules about training. Emily's family became regular fixtures in their lives. Her mother came over for dinner every other week, always bringing something elaborate she'd baked and always making time to play with Lily. Melissa and Jessica became genuine friends rather than just relatives, sharing wine and laughter and stories about the complicated journey to finding real happiness. Ryan remarried and moved to Denver, his infrequent contact with Lily dwindling to birthday cards and the occasional awkward phone call. Lily didn't seem to mind, secure in the family she had rather than mourning the father who'd never shown up for her. Marco continued transforming his business empire, moving further from the gray areas until he could honestly say he ran legitimate operations. It cost him some power, some connections, but he gained peace of mind and the ability to sleep at night knowing his family was truly safe. Emily returned to work part-time, finding a perfect balance between her career and her home life. She loved her patients, loved making a difference, but she also loved being home when Lily got back from school, loved having time to cook dinner with Marco and walk Pancake through their neighborhood. One evening in late spring, Emily found herself back at the Drake Hotel for a charity event. She stood in the same ballroom where she'd sat alone at table 17 just 8 months earlier. But this time Marco was beside her and everything was different. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing her distant expression. "About how much has changed since Melissa's wedding. How I sat alone at that table over there feeling invisible and defeated, and now I'm here with you, living a life I couldn't have imagined." Marco looked at table 17, which currently seated a young woman who seemed uncomfortable and out of place among the elegant crowd. "Should we go talk to her? Offer some company?" Emily smiled at her husband, at this man who'd learned the value of small kindnesses. Yeah, let's go offer her a dance. They crossed the ballroom together, and Emily thought about fate and choices and the unexpected ways life could transform, about how sometimes accepting help from a stranger could lead to everything, about how the most remarkable love stories often began with a simple question and a willingness to say yes. She thought about the family she'd built, the husband she loved, the daughter who thrived, the home they'd created together from courage and honesty, and a dance that had lasted far longer than one song. And as Marco asked the lonely woman at table 17 if she'd like some company, as Emily saw recognition and gratitude bloom in her eyes, she felt the circle of their story complete itself. From invisible to seen, from alone to belonging, from a single dance to a lifetime of choosing each other every day through all the complications and joys that made up a real life, really lived. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.